too, so, yeah.
I can hear something. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jason. Can you hear me?
I didn't hear the last part of that, but
Can you hear us now?
I can hear that. I can hear very clearly. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just think there was someone walking through those feedback. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would make a motion to amend the agenda by adding item 8.A.II.1, hiring recommendation of OHS math teacher. Is there a second? Second. Any other adjustments or questions? We'll go ahead and vote on the proposed change. We're all in person, so all in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up are the minutes. I would make a motion to approve the minutes, May 7th, 2024 is presented. Is there a second? Second. Any discussions or corrections? Seeing none, thank you again, Rachel. We always use to have corrections, so you're doing a great job. Thank you. I will go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Passes 5-0. I would make a motion to approve regular warrant 23, payroll warrant 23, main purse for April 2024, and capital improvement warrant number 10. Is there a second? Second. Discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Next up is public comment. I do see several people here and several people online who might be commenting, so I think we will go ahead and do just a sign up. Anybody who would like to do a public comment? If you're online, just indicate in the chat or raise your hand, and if you're here in person, if you'd like to speak public comment, go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, and well, maybe I overestimated, I'm not seeing anybody online. All right, some of you haven't been here with us for a while. Just a quick reminder about the public comment. They are capped at 3 minutes. You should identify yourself first, no anonymous public comments. And public comments should not discuss specific employees or descriptions like that would quickly lead to a specific employee. But those are pretty much the only constraints. So we'll go ahead and open up the floor. Who would like to go first?
There a particular space?
No. Just
The owl
towards
works.
microphone.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm Deb White. I live at 11 Sylvan Road, Orono, and currently am employed as an RSU 26 teacher at Orono Middle School for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies. I started my career in education in early childhood education. My expertise is in developmentally appropriate education. And now I have to go to my notes. And that's what I'm speaking to you as, about the increased pressure to have accelerated classes in middle school. And the reason I am speaking against that is because developmentally it is not appropriate for that age group, just as it's not appropriate for pre-K2 students. And if we think back 30 plus years ago, in 1st grade, I was directed by the curriculum of this school district in 1st grade to teach a unit on color identification, on families, who is your family, and how to spell your very first name. That's it. Now we expect pre-K kids to know that coming into pre-K. Kids aren't smarter now. We just push them a whole lot more. And they still need to have developmentally appropriate practices and in experiences. And in some cases, we need to have more of those developmentally appropriate experiences, because these things have pushed us far from what we want in terms of needing to develop as human beings, the skills we need. The World Economic Forum that met in January of 24, but They call this the top 10 skills of 2023. And they include analytical think and 1 to 10, analytical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, and agility, motivation and self-awareness, curiosity and lifelong learning, technological literacy, how to learn, how to use the technology, dependability and attention to detail, empathy and active listening, leadership and social influence, and quality control. And these are listed by the World Economic Forum as cognitive skills, not soft skills. About 5 years ago, they were calling those the soft skills that employees needed. We need to make sure that our middle school students have those basic life skills of getting along with each other, making choices, apologizing, making a mistake and not having the world blow up on them or implode, finding strength in their growing bodies and brains, exploring what fascinates them, spending time creating. We do a lot of that in pre-K to in early childhood education, but it doesn't stop at the end. My minutes are up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, finish your sentence or thought, but
The constant pressure to excel in all areas by pushing the expectation of advanced classes on honors classes for middle schoolers does not allow them the time to solidify their developmental growth that's necessary at this time. Thank you for listening.
great, thank you. Other public comment?
I said,
Yeah, just so people on the panel can hear you.
so I have three. Hi, my name is Jessica Archer. I'm a middle school teacher, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, including sixth grade ELA, seventh grade science, and eighth grade health. So I will be reading. I haven't had a chance to memorize anything, but so please bear with me. So I'd like to begin by expressing how much I enjoy being a teacher. I have taught students at Orono now for 24 years. I've been supported in my pursuit of advanced degrees and national board certification. I've also been supportive with my many visions, such as creation of the school garden, Right Buddy program, and Right Good. I am grateful for all of these opportunities. Last year at this time, I was honored as County Teacher of the Year. I was excited about this upcoming year of service, but conflicted due to an essay used as part of my selection to serve. The essay topic was inclusion and equity. I wrote about how I teach to meet the needs of all my students in an inclusive classroom. During this time, we were moving forward with another year of accelerating students in a separate class and adding seventh graders to the mix. I, along with other teachers, recognized this would create a tracking structure, and that was where lay the conflict. Here, I was discussing inclusion with other county teachers of the year, yet at OMS, we were shifting to more of a structure that did not seem inclusive. I am not opposed to challenging students. All students need to be challenged. I am not opposed to acceleration if students are truly ready for it. What keeps me up at night is the shift is doing to our students' mental health. What happens to the student who wants to be in the acceleration course with their peers but does not qualify? What happens to the student who tries and cannot keep up with the work and feels as though they have failed? What happens to the student who enters a non-accelerated class, looks around and says, I'm in the stupid class? These are situations that continue to occur over and over again, and it is really hard to take. We speak of this on and off ramps into and out of the accelerated courses. For many students, there simply is not an on ramp. The structure is inaccessible to them because of a variety of factors, so they miss out on the opportunity and access to a curriculum of thinking and materials simply because of their current status and to certain peers. This may include prior education experiences or lack thereof, SES status, an IEP, or many other factors. Why not create a structure in which all students are on the on-ramp and then we move forward without exclusion? When teachers at OMS first presented with the information about the acceleration option for students, we were not asked what we thought about it. We shared our concerns. We knew this because of the small numbers of the students and staff, that this would be a problem in our school structure. What is most perplexing to me is how we were not treated as the experts in our field. Collectively, the ELA teachers at OMS have over 100 years of experience teaching middle school students. We have at least one, if not two, master's degree each. Just a couple sentences. We have national board certifications. We are problem solvers and constantly challenging and changing to meet the needs of students. If what we are doing was not meeting the student needs, we collaborate and we figure it out. We do this every single day. I just don't understand why we were not part of the solution when we have dedicated our careers to understanding middle school students. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody's been on time. I think we could probably open it up if anybody else did want to speak.
I think I can be heard from here, and I'll keep it short and sweet because I'm overtired with a sick baby at home. So Tracy DeShane, I teach math at Orno Middle School, and I believe I'm the one that has taught accelerated classes the longest in the middle school, because that's what I was hired to actually do 11 years ago. I was hired to take the math program to a different level than what had been with the heterogeneous grouping that we had, and we created homogeneous groups. Over the past 11 years, we have vamped and revamped qualification rubrics. We have rewritten classes to try to be more inclusive, and this was an 11-year process. And to watch my colleagues in English go through this and have it pushed at them in less than 2-year time, saying that this is best pedagogy, when we're sitting here with, like Mrs. Archer said, national board certifications and county teachers of the year. We didn't get that because we don't know what we're doing. And to not be consulted on the way that this would be pushed through was almost insulting to our professionalism. And as a result, what we've seen is the mental health of our students has rapidly declined. And I've seen over the past 11 years of teaching accelerated students, a decline in the ability for students to emotionally regulate when they are faced with that level of learning. Their social emotional well-being is not the same as it was 11 years ago. And I can honestly say I have not taught one student in the past, since COVID, that has not at one point told me, I can't do this, it's too hard, I don't want to do this, or not come with something not done because they didn't understand it, and the skills of being able to find the resources to be able to understand it are not there. And yet we're still pushing them to accelerate because that's what they're communicating, but not seeing the skill sets that we're seeing that are lacking in all of the other developmental areas of a middle school student. So I'm just asking that we be listened to in regards to the whole student and not just subject content, because that's not what middle school teaching is all about.
Thank you. We do have somebody on Zoom. Tristan, please go ahead. Unmute and go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
We can. If you could get louder, it would be better.
Okay, so so I'm the parent of a current 6th grader at OMS, as well as a 5th grader at ASA, and we're new to Orono since last summer, so we have about a year under our belts here. Our 6th grader came into OMS at the beginning of the academic year, performing at an exceptionally advanced level relative to most of his peers in his ELA capacities, and at the absolute upper end for math. He was typing 45 words a minute. He's formally sort of identified as gifted and talented using the nationally utilized COGAT test, and his previous school prepared him for essay composition and related tasks with regard to ESA, well above the level that we're experiencing at 5th grade at ASA currently. The current 6th grade ELA model, it worked beautifully for our son, is working beautifully for him, despite the fact that he's sort of the target audience for any kind of acceleration. And so we saw Mrs. White and Mrs. Archer assess his abilities from the beginning of the school year and individually tailor his assignments so that they were challenging for him, and really a case study application of school enrichment, something we're very happy with. We were really impressed also with how his teachers in ELA were able to leverage Google Classroom environment to adjust their students' assignments to their abilities, and saw some really good applications of novel technology in that regard. And so, in summary, we, my family, my wife and I are opposed to adding on the 6th and 7th grade flex or honors ELA classes. We've witnessed firsthand that the current ELA teachers are really able to beautifully meet the needs of all learners in that integrated environment with the current model, and really enjoy the fact that it's supporting diversity in the classroom in a way that's enriching the environment for all students. So I'd like to really emphasize our support for OMS ELA teachers in opposing adding those honors classes. As my wife, Lisa Dermer, wrote in a letter to the board last week, we do not want teachers to be asked to teach in ways that go against their professional training and experience, and believe that most other parents would not want to see that either. So really thank you for your time and consideration of our thoughts.
Great, thank you. Last call for public comment.
I'll just talk from here. I provided public comment over email. And I just wanted to reiterate after hearing some public comment here about how impactful and positive the accelerated options have been for our family. And the comment about kids feeling like they're gonna fail. I feel like I'm gonna fail at work on a regular basis. Like, there's no way I can write this grant. There's no way I can go in and testify to the legislature. Like, that's a part of learning and growth. My kids come home and say, this is so hard, I can't do it. And then they get an A and they're doing great. And I just feel like we need to create an environment where kids are challenged. It might not feel right for everyone all the time. And that's why there's multiple pathways. And I feel like the lack of an ELA pathway, if math started 11 years ago, I would wonder, why didn't ELA start 11 years ago? And instead of thinking of this as being pushed down as a mandate, it's we're behind the 8 ball on this. Other schools are doing this. There's lots of research behind it, and there are kids that are ready and want it, and let's offer that to them and think of it as a positive opportunity for these kids.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on. Just wanted to acknowledge all the comments that were made. I appreciate the teachers in particular, sometimes it's easy to show up and comment on, just mentioned the example of a grant for a garden, but other times it's not so easy to show up and comment. And I appreciate that we have a culture where everybody shows up and has a positive discussion on both sides of things. So I appreciate that. That's, I think, a really important part of the high functioning district. So I appreciate that. Just to acknowledge, we have received, I think it's 8 letters, if I remember correctly, maybe 4 pro and 4 against, some maybe it was 3 and 5, but those letters added nuance and detail too. We don't have a formal reading into the record of those letters, but wanted to acknowledge they came, and I certainly read all of them in full detail, and based on my experience with my colleagues, I'm sure all the other board members did as well. So we'll go ahead and move on to the agenda at this point. So we'll start with acknowledgements. Jake.
I just wanted to pick up where you kind of left off. I just want to acknowledge everyone who did give us their opinions on the topic, and thank them for the thoughtful deliberation and thoughtful input. So I appreciate it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for writing. It makes sense.
Noah?
I I'd echo that too. And I got another thing to order for this week too, but the art festival and there was a school trip or the band trip down to Funtown. I got to go with the chaperone. A lot of cool things going on in the district. Side this hot topic right now, but I'm thankful for all the people that are help put those special events on when we come to the end of the year and have all these fun things happening. So.
Art?
Oh, it is nice to see people in the room. It's been a while, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yep. Ursa?
Well done to the Arts Night people. Best of luck to all of the sports that are wrapping up right now. There's something else I wanted to say, and I can't remember what it is. Oh, yeah, that's, I was gonna end with that. It's slay to you guys, it's icons. Everybody who spoke up is well done.
Meredith?
Just to provide a little more, nuance acknowledgement for the Arts Night. As most probably know, this has typically been two separate events happening, and people talked about, why don't we try to have these on three separate events? Okay, three separate events. Have them on the same night to bring more cross interest to those independent events. And it was just a really great night. I want to thank the staff who were involved in doing that, and they're kind of thinking about how to create partnerships in the arts, but also just students and parents who participated in that night. It was a really fun celebration as one of our, maybe new traditions for how we do Arts Night to bring the community together as we close the year. So thanks to all who made that happen.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I was out of town on my son's graduation, but it looked like a fantastic event. Would very much like to go. We'll start with, yeah.
Sorry,
No,
just
go ahead.
best of luck to seniors in their finals this week.
Indeed. Start with director reports. Lisa?
Good evening, everyone. Some of you may remember that there was an opioid case that school districts were reached out to as far as wanting to be involved, and we became involved in 2020 and have had, periodic updates. Well, they've reached a resolution, and part of the decision was that the districts that were involved would be compensated with $2,000, which we have received. We put that towards our behavior analyst expenses. We felt that was probably most appropriate, and those expenses have continued to rise. So it was a nice compensation. At this point in the year, we've scheduled 412 IEP meetings. That doesn't include any of the 504 meetings or any of the various other meetings that we attend. We've evaluated 137 students this year, 35 of which were initial referrals. That's a pretty high number. We currently still have 20 students in referral that we hope to receive evaluations on and meet before the year is out. I'm starting to have my doubts whether or not that is going to be possible. We have so many resources in order to get those things done, but hopefully we'll get as many done as we possibly can. Other than that, we've had Eric Blacksmith join us as our new MLL teacher. He's hit the ground running. He's working to become familiar with students and staff, and pretty positive about his role so far. And that's it. Any questions?
No questions? Thanks, Lisa. Those numbers are impressive, so thank you for sharing. We'll go ahead to Director of Learning, Susan.
My written report is mostly about topics that we'll discuss later on in the agenda, so I'll just give you a quick couple verbal updates. Want to invite you all to the Orono Schools Research Symposium. It is tomorrow night from 6:30 to 7:30 in the OHS gym, and gives our AP research students, our students that are striving towards graduation with distinction, and our kids that participated in science fairs a chance to showcase their work. So please come if you can. NWA testing and the science testing. Science has wrapped up in NWA testing. We're doing makeups this week. And wanted to let you know that I also met with Sonia Berthasol last week. We've hired Sonia to do some data analysis for us. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that the colored quadrants graphs that we like for NWA are being retired, and they will no longer provide those for us. So Sonia is working as one of our first projects on making sure that we have the data that we need, and the background coding, so that we can continue sharing those reports and looking at that kind of data as well. Let's see. And I want to just give a shout out to Ben Jacobson as well. He is our food nutrition expert here, but he has added a link to our RSU 26 page. If you go under About Us, you can see that there's a district wellness page now with many resources and some of the work that's been happening and that been organized that I just think is fantastic.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments? Am I misremembering that we usually do student reports on this night?
I think we do, don't we? Yeah.
Do you have a
We
student
usually
report
go-
regardless?
It's okay,
or
it's
not?
okay.
Actually, we read this and we're very confused and didn't prepare one.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We'll give you a
I
chance
feel
next
like
time.
something's missing.
The two of us talked to each other, we were like, did you do a report last week? We read it.
Yeah, no, screw up on the agenda side of things. Apologies, but you don't have to wait a week. We'll squeeze you up next time.
No, it's okay. We'll have a banger one next time.
It'll be
There you
great.
go. We'll
There's
just
so many
set the bar
things
really
happening.
high.
It's gonna be great.
All right, superintendent report.
Most of what I have to bring to you is already on the agenda under discussion and other items, but I want to solicit a board member for the interview committee for the facilities transportation director interview process. We're going to get started with that committee next week, so looking for a board member to serve.
I'd be happy
I was gonna say,
to.
I don't really want to volunteer anybody, but given Brian's experience with the building project, I think he'd be the best fit.
That'd be great. Perfect. Glad you didn't have to get voluntold by Mark. Do you have any questions otherwise, or should we jump into the discussion items?
Anything else on the superintendent report? We'll go ahead and jump into discussion items.
I provided you with a copy of, the enrollment data that we put together. And I'm just going to share my screen so we can have it. Okay. So, we provided some information a couple of months ago as we were looking at our enrollment projections in terms of how our tuition revenue was shaping up for next fiscal year. And in that discussion, Mark asked for some additional data. And so from that request, Meredith Diamond started and pulled some data, and then Lynn and I took the deep dive to pull together information. What's a little challenging about what we were trying to pull together is it relies on getting information from other districts that some are more willing to share than others. So we were mostly able to get everything. There's one place where I can show you that we didn't. But first I want to show you, I think your first page looks like this. This chart has, let me make it larger. This chart has current year enrollment for Orono on the top row. So as of the October count is what we did to try to make it consistent here. And you can see that these numbers in high school are resident students, because you know, you can see that our high school enrollment is like 320 something right now. And these numbers clearly add up to about, 190 or so. And then you can see for Greenbush, Glenburn, Indian Island, Milford, VZ, which are 5 kind of major sending towns that have K-8 programs only who send us high school students. Their current year enrollment for each of their grades. Some reported pre-K to 8, some just K to 8. And then what you see over to the right of that in yellow, I put together the numbers from those districts at the time they were entering freshmen, because I think that's what I think that's one of the questions that Mark has, and I also have, is, how how are we holding up across attracting tuition students in that year they make the transition from 8th to 9th grade? And so those numbers in yellow reflect a moment in time when that cohort entered 9th grade. So those aren't current year numbers that you see highlighted in yellow. So what this shows us, as you can see here, is, obviously with our data, we know in enrollment, Orono resident enrollment, we have ups and downs. We have cohorts that are really large. We have a really large 7th grade cohort, a really large 4th grade cohort. We have a really large, really 11th and 12th grade cohort that came through Orono schools. And then you have, smaller cohorts that come through, and then we have kind of the more typical. And what I had been hearing in the regional superintendent meetings is discussion that at least a couple of our major sending towns were really seeing enrollment declines compared to what they have had, maybe prior to COVID. I think that's the line that people are seeing a change happen around. So when we look at, one of the things I was looking at here is how does that impact that tuition base? When we had our enrollment study, the company that did it talked about what is the base number of students that you're, have as an opportunity to attract into your high school program. And when they looked at that data, they determined that on average or kind of the target that we should reasonably expect is around 24% of that base. And so when you see like this, I didn't have enough data for grade 12 because I didn't have the Greenbush number. That's where I am missing something. But when you look at grade 11, you can see that we hit that year. If we were going to get it 24 students or 24%, we would have 28 tuition students. And that year we had 40. With the current 10th grade class, 24% of that tuition base would have been 29.5 students. We hit 40. Last year, our current freshman class, 24% would be 26 students, and we had 34. And then what we're seeing this year is this big drop happen, where 24% of the base of 106 students would be 25 students, and we have 21 that we're expecting from sending towns coming to OHS as 9th graders next year. So we have this, drop off, and one of the questions we were trying to answer is how does that compare to the potential number of students out there? And it's really not different from the year before. I mean, 3 students different than the year before. And what we see coming looks like it has a lot of ups and downs. But in a second, we're going to look at how this picture we see this year of the total tuition base that ranges from, I'm not counting the pre-K because we don't have a couple. The lowest year cohort is 96 students, and the largest cohort is 125 students. You can see across this blue line at the bottom. So this year at 106 is, on the lower side of what we're going to see coming. When you look at this other chart, oh, goodness, sorry, it's a lot of data and it's really small. What we can see here, I think, no, it was not there. It's in another chart. Sorry, I didn't bring that other chart. There's another data sheet that I modeled this one after that we did in 17-18 when we put together our enrollment study. In that set of data, the enrollment base was more like in the average of 120 was really more the average, where largest years were 150 or 160 in the region. So there definitely is a decline in enrollment in Glenburn and Milford, most notably, I think are the biggest, seem to be, have the biggest drops that we're seeing as we look across their K-8 enrollment. So it is something that I think we need to understand and recognize in terms of our recruitment strategies. Because the base has gotten smaller. And there are some years that that's going to be more impactful for us than others. Like when we have those groups of 60 coming up in the 7th and 4th grade cohorts, it's not as worrisome to have a small tuition class, but we know that programming at the high school really is dependent on being able to support that financially, and that means being able to attract students to augment our budget to be able to have the kind of program I think Orono looks to have. So, I think part of this data raises some other questions for me, like around retention. I think that was another question that Mark had, and I really don't have that information. Other than to see on this slide, you can track cohorts, vertical or horizontally to see some years, like I noticed, this 10th grade cohort from Glenburn in 2021-22 was at 25. So that's this year's seniors. So they are really we attracted a large group of students from Glenburn that year. So they were at 25 their sophomore year. In grade 11, they were at 20, and grade 12, they're at 19. So that's a net loss of 6 over 3 years. I'm not sure what they entered in that freshman year because we don't have that data. But we see some drops like that happen, and I think that's something that we're going to have to be more cognizant of tracking and looking for trends to see if there are things we can learn from feedback when we lose kind of cohorts of students in that manner. We know the recruiting game is difficult because 8th grade students make decisions about high school for many reasons. And what we know is there's probably a big friend effect, right? When you get a certain group of kids deciding to go to one school, sometimes there's a group that follows. I think that's benefited us some years. And in other years, probably it went the other direction. But, I think this is data that we can look at to determine kind of what our forecast looks like. If we were to hit the 24%, what does that mean for what our budget picture around revenue is going to look like. And I think it's a little too soon to determine if we have can you find who's not me? If we have a kind of new average that's going to be our reality and not 24%. If you look at the averages, the 3 years prior to this, we were, I didn't do the averages in my head, but we were definitely probably close to 30% most of those years, if not higher. So Meredith, I know Meredith just had a chance to see this afternoon. Do you have anything to add to the picture here before we open up for questions? Or Sam, she's on the.
I mean, not necessarily about the picture. This is, an ongoing conversation in the building. It's also one that is, lives outside the realm, to be honest, of, the traditional public school teacher's assignment in terms of, thinking about, how is it that we are marketing ourselves to our surrounding communities, and, how does that, what degree of bandwidth should I dedicate to that? And so I think that we have made some pivots in recent years in an effort to help folks understand the unique offerings of Orono High School that, those who live this reality know are very different than what there are in other schools. But I think for me now that the question is becoming one, not necessarily of recruitment, but of how we tell the story of Orono High School year round in the region. And that is something that we haven't really touched yet. We started last year doing the graduation tour. Historically, we've had our graduates head down to ASA during marching practice week to, kind of send that inspiring message of, years from now, this will be you too. Last year, Sam, turned that into a regional tour. Where we started going to, the towns that, are from which we receive a critical mass of students, and that was something that was really well received. And that we will continue. And, I think that, as we have this conversation, as Meredith pointed out, it can be really difficult to predict how kids make this decision in their 8th grade moment. What feels like we have more control over is the understanding that the region has of Orono High School on a day-to-day basis throughout the year as years turn into more years. And I think that that is the place where this data points me in terms of thinking about what comes next for us, simply because, the moment of recruitment, in that window of time from, December to May, by the time we sit down with those kids, the vast majority of them have made up their minds. And so we need to find out how to be a voice in their decision-making before we get to that point.
Sam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with what she just said, but I also have been encouraged and been trying to think a lot from many of the conversations we've had in our strategic planning, in our DEI work, in our wellness committee work, just how to, like, we constantly are talking about how to reach some of those out, towns from outside of Orono and really get them to understand and be a part of what we do and know what we do and feel as if they're a part of our community. And I continue to feel like if we keep all those efforts keep working towards that goal, that my hope is that this too will be another benefit, in that they already feel a part of and aware of what goes on at Orono High School. And I think examples like the visual and performing arts night that you brought up, that just was amazing. And it brought in a vast majority of community members in a large scale, and some that from all of our towns, to be honest. I got to interact with quite a few. And I saw that as a positive effort in this goal that we have. So I think, as Meredith said, not, really working together to not just see it as recruitment time and step up day, which I am proud of to be a part of the group that's really worked hard over the years to improve those efforts, but also year round, how can we continue to reach out and become a part and a known entity of which people feel they're a member of at Orono High School, and then thus want to attend or want to send their children our way.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I mean, I have a couple thoughts. I think Meredith and Sandra, right? We need to pivot from this is a, shot in time to this is a long-term marketing and brand building effort. I think most business people would probably look at it that way, and that's probably there are a bunch of educators that we haven't looked at it that way. So I think that's dead on. And I think, as was said, the strategic plan probably is a big step in terms of identifying a brand for this district and this high school. I also think the board has a role in terms of thinking about resources we invest, right? It's easy to just say high school, go recruit, but should we be sending a glossy brochure to sending towns, or not to, but or sending towns for the high school every year? I think some of these kinds of questions need to be on the table as well. I look at the numbers and I see what we've always known. These are small towns and things are just chunky and bumpy. I don't see huge trends. Maybe Glenburn's down a little bit, but if anything, VZ's up a little bit. So I'm not seeing huge trends. I'm also not seeing huge trends in which towns are coming or not coming. It's been a long known phenomenon, one influencer in the 8th grade can drag a lot of kids with them to a particular high school. So it's always been kind of chunky and up and down where they come, but I'm just not seeing a lot of trends that, other than the one Meredith mentioned, the post-COVID trend of, a lot of districts lost 10-20% of their students through COVID, whether it's through homeschooling or I think people are still absenteeism. People are still trying to sort out exactly what this phenomenon is, but whether that's going to return or not, I don't think we know. But take that out, just looking at the, the grades that are in the schools, I don't see these trends. So that gives me, a positive feeling. It's not like we need to start planning for a shrinking place right now. I do look and see that we have a 3-year stretch, 4-year stretch, grade 10, 9, 8, and 7 are all on the small. Really, it's down to grade 5 before we get big again. So I do think we have a couple of years of planning. I don't, I think it'd be a mistake to think about that as planning, for a permanent situation, but I think we'll wanna put on our flexibility hats and think about things for the next few years, because that's just right. The numbers are random and up and down, and there's just a string of random downs as opposed to random ups.
After next year though, for the sending community, which is super low next year, after that, the next 2 years after that are pretty large. Which might, if we are able to attract some of those, mitigate
Yeah,
some of the lower numbers in Oregon.
yeah, you're right. I mean, you have enough districts, right? The random, they should all cancel each other out, but, yeah, to me, I don't see trends. I see maybe a couple of years we have to be careful and be flexible, but I don't see trends. And I do think the notion of starting to switch to year-round brand building and recruitment is probably the right mentality for the other people see or think. Oh,
I guess, I still relatively new to understanding the dynamics here, but. So where does Bangor fit in like here, I guess?
so
Because,
there are competition for these students.
right, and so we don't have any data on like. That, because it seems like they're,
And that's the other half of the equation, like, and we, I appreciate this data, this is great, but it gives us one half, it doesn't give us half of how are our competition schools faring and attracting tuition students, and that's gonna be difficult to get, right? I mean, they're probably not gonna be, terribly forthcoming. I'm gonna try and carve out a little bit of time this summer to see if maybe they do something like this and they can make reports and put the documents on, but we need. In an ideal world, we know that too, right? Because anecdotally, it does sound like Hamden in particular is up, and Herman is up. Is at least anecdotal.
and I guess also to. I mean, I don't know if there are other towns that. Aren't sending to us, but do send to Bangor or in this region, that could be part of like broader trend averaging, because off the 5 towns, you can't, see the trends maybe, but. Maybe there's a regional.
If you look at the other tab, you can see there are a handful of other tabs that are other places that we get students from, but really proximity wise, there aren't.
Well, yeah, and this is what I mean, I mean like things that aren't sending to us, but are part of the regional, like trend, if there is one, like moving from the country, let's see. Population changes, going back, the broader trends, I guess. Yeah, that would be my other question.
I think I'm more interested in, and you kind of alluded to it, Meredith, but we don't have the math in front of us, like. If the target's 24%, obviously we've outperformed the target over the last 3 years. What is our average for the last 3 years? Or even maybe looking back further, what's our average for the last 5 or 10 years? And then where is that average going in respect to what other schools average are and what they're doing, right? Because regardless of the amount of students, there's still a pie of students, whether that's 300 or 200, but we can't control the student population, but we hope we can control the percentage that we get at least and be consistent on that or improve on that.
Right, and that 24% came from.
Our enrollment study that was done in 2017, that we haven't had another enrollment study done. So that was looking back in time at that point, looking at, what's the average that we're getting and what's the kind of expected target that you should be able to aim for every year.
That was sort of the average back then.
Well, it was kind of an expected target that you should be able to attain. So it's kind of the low range of, the average over time.
So we have increased since then, relatively, if we look at these numbers.
Yeah, we had some strong years that you can see in the junior class and the sophomore class were strong years for sure. And the senior class is also a strong class. And I think there were some things some activities pulling students in that had nothing to do with efforts of, the high school administration. It was some, like the football program that, the coach invested in a youth program coming up, and it brought a whole group of students from Glenburn for several years. What's that?
We weren't able to keep all those kids.
No, we weren't, but that was an impact. I think bringing more students in from Glenburn during some of those years that has since waned away. And, you know, things like summer track, bring in programs, bring in students from surrounding communities to Orono. And, you know, lots of times those students want to come here for high school. So, you know, those are programs that draw students in. I forget where I was going with this. Oh, the strong years. I think those years that you see here had both of those factors in addition to, you know, other recruiting that was happening. But, you know, definitely we can tell our story better. It's something that I think some districts do really well, and some districts have really staff allocated to doing that kind of work, and we haven't done that. We certainly could look at that and determine how much that might cost to produce, but I think you know, we had money in the budget for recruitment, and the high school had shifted gears and wasn't using that money and said, well, we don't really need that much, we'll reduce it. So, you know, I think if we want to do new things, we just need to figure out what those are and budget for it. But I'm not a statistician like you are, but I see in 1 year, we're dropping 45 students as a district, and that feels pretty big to me. And what I see coming behind it doesn't look very different. And so I feel like maybe the trend that I see us, you know, if you look on the second page, it shows kind of the year to year. It shows next year's enrollment projection for our district, which is 784. This year's October enrollment was 829. So, you know, when you look at that, it's a pretty big drop from where we've been the last few years. And it looks like that might be the new normal for a while. So I think, you know, this year we had a hard financial year. And so wanting to see, is it going to change next year? I don't see that it's going to change in the next couple of years unless we, you know, get a lot more tuition students coming our way or something changes with state subsidy.
Next year's almost certainly gonna be worse. Right? I mean, it's hard to imagine that it's not significantly worse next year.
Next year,
With a lower
I think
base.
the year after that.
With the base of 96, it's just a little.
I mean, we're just not gonna magically start recruiting 35 or 40% of the available population, much as I would like to.
We're not gonna be able to paper over that loss to the degree that we did this year. So
Yeah.
unless something changes, if you didn't like this year, next year's gonna be way worse.
And anecdotally, I still have some connections at Glenburn. Everything from 6th grade onward are planning to go to other places. I know the 6th graders this year, most of them feel really good about Brewer because that's where older siblings went.
And that's a new Glenburn Brewer. It was not really a common sending destination for Glenburn students. So that's a new trend.
Do you know, do we have any statistics on once we get a sending student as a freshman, assuming they don't move anywhere, they still live in their sending towns? What's the percentage of them that stay with us to graduation?
Yeah, that's one thing I said. I don't have the retention numbers about how many we keep. I mean, we can see,
We don't know why we've lost these
Yeah, you
kids,
can-
but you can see it on here. If you look at our four major sending communities are Glenburn, Milford, Greenbush, and Vesey, right? And if you look at the net from 10th grade to 12th grade, we're down 6 in Glenburn, we're down 3 in Milford, we're flat in Greenbush, we're down 1 in Vesey. That's 10 kids.
yeah, you can
That's
see it on the
real.
vertical, like if you look at
Yeah, diagonal.
diagonal, thank you. On this chart, you can see it, but we don't have anything to explain why. And if it was 5 kids left and we got 3, so a net change of X, we don't really know that from this chart.
Well, that was my second part of the question. Is it common for us to get sending kids who are not freshmen, who go to school and decide that I don't like that? I mean,
I think we do.
Yeah, that happens all the time. You know, and part of it is that, you know, students have choice, and so sometimes they end up in one place and realize that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. Like when we have students who come here, it's like I was fooled on step up day is a phrase that, you know, emerges periodically. And which, you know, of course, the lived reality is going to be different than, you know, what you can grasp in an afternoon. But I think that, you know, another piece of this equation is the degree to which students themselves have changed. over the past 10 years. And the idea that, you know, when we did our presentation, to the faculty in September around, you know, some of the shifts that we have observed in the building, over the past few years, you know, we are beginning to get our arms around, you know, how outside influences have changed, how goals have changed, how decisions about spending money on college, you know, have impacted things, how early college, has impacted, how, free community college has impacted things. And I think that though there are similar questions that extend down into grades 9-12 that we haven't begun to tackle yet, that invite us to think about how the way in which students have evolved is impacting the way they're deciding about school. And, you know, throughout the past few years, different high schools in the region are making pivots in different directions. And sometimes it feels a little bit like, you know, reaching in the dark, and that we don't know, you know, what the impacts of these are going to be, or whether they are responding to needs that we actually observe, or needs that we anticipate are there. But as it is now, when we travel to these communities and I ask kids, like, what is it that you, like, what do you understand to be true about Orono High School? What they share is almost always word of mouth. Like, word of mouth is how people have an understanding of us. And to me, that feels like an invitation, right? Because there is a void that exists, right? If you ask a kid what their understanding of John Baptist is, what you'll hear is a lot of what is pushed out by the folks whose job it is to tell the story of Baptist through a pretty well-funded marketing campaign. We have an opportunity, not necessarily to mimic that, but to be clear about what is it that we are doing here that sets us apart? What is it that we offer kids that other schools don't? And when we push that out there, we're not going to be fighting against what the old story was. We're going to be stepping into a vacancy. And I think that when we do that, it is possible that there will be a coming to attention about something folks didn't realize was there, but has been here all the time.
I mean, I completely agree. If we were a business, we'd be running focus groups to find out what students want, and we would have message discipline year after year about this is who we are after testing that it was a successful message. And we certainly aren't doing focus groups. I mean, you're doing it informally through polling kids, but we don't have a lot of message discipline either. Everybody in this district has a different reason why to come to Orono, and I suspect these kids are hearing 10 different reasons too, which is really not the way, as you said, to get into brain space and start, you know, the core principle of marketing is owning one word. And what's the one word that we own? Is it, I think a lot of people want it to be academic excellence, but I'm not sure. We're a great school, we're always in the top 10 in the state, et cetera, but Bangor has academic excellence. I think John Baptist seems like they offer academic excellence as well. You know, we have a great arts program, but Old Town has a great arts program. What, you know, if there's one word we own, we haven't actually had that conversation. And what's the word that we own that's unique in this region and that sells to kids? I think we need to start talking more like a marketing campaign.
Marissa.
Marissa.
I think something else to internalize, even if we don't go anywhere with it, is that students that move out of the district, like just students that have moved into our school, are truly some of the harshest critics of their previous district. If like I've heard kids come from BAPS and you hear the nitty gritty, the day to day when they transfer into a school. And if you are coming from a different school, it is typically because you found fault in it in some way. So understanding that we do have bad press, and to how to create the good press is something that we should focus on, but also how to look at the systems that we have now and the sort of internal structure that we have now, and look at it and think, what could somebody say? Because that's what marketing teams do too, is where are we getting bad press from? And how is that actually positive, because our school is promoting a positive atmosphere?
All right, we do have a lot on the agenda. Anything else people want to discuss or next steps?
The one thing I guess I'll add 2 things, because this topic is, in my opinion, incredibly important in what we're gonna be able to do with the high school going forward. If we can't somehow change these results, then the high school almost certainly has to change, right? So one thing I think that we should seriously investigate is we did manage for a number of years to have dramatically higher yields than that projection, right? How did that happen? Was it luck of the draw? Was it chance? Was it popular kids from sending schools coming here? Maybe. But we should really seriously look at that. Given the smaller N, we almost certainly have to increase the yield on that. So that's one thing. Second thing is these data, I appreciate Meredith and the staff putting this together. These data also really point to the importance of retention, right? We haven't really talked a lot about retention. But clearly we're getting kids in the door and then we're losing them. At least we're net down, right? And there could be a bunch of reasons for that. But it could be that we're getting kids in the door and they're not particularly happy with what they get and they look elsewhere, right? The third thing, and I think this relates to the word of mouth point that Meredith raised. And Marissa alluded to this, the word of mouth that they're getting is almost certainly what they're hearing from other kids, right? That's what they're getting, right? And if they're hearing, the word of mouth they're getting about Orono High School is not good, that means that the other kids that they're talking to are saying not good things about Orono High School, right? Why is that? I think we got a problem. So, it's something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Okay. Ready to move to the next topic, OHS volleyball.
We spoke about this last meeting. And decided to bring it back this meeting so that you could just have some time to think about it, digest the information. Mike Archer, I think is on the call. He was having to join from the track meet. Oh, I can stop sharing the screen and see who's here. I don't see him unless he's the iPhone. Oh, there he is. I see. Okay. So I asked Mike to put together some information, just reviewing what we talked about last meeting after several requests came forward for us to consider offering volleyball at OHS as a sport, as an athletic offering. And we went through several different steps of seeing if there was opportunity to build a cooperative team with maybe schools in the area that don't have teams. That was after us actually asking if we could join another existing team. Existing teams don't have room. There are no other districts in our region who want to join us to form a cooperative team. So it leaves us figuring out by ourselves, what can we do? What would it cost? And is that something that we feel like we can sustain? One of the challenges, are, I guess I should say, remind that we have 13 students who've expressed interest who will be in the high school next year. So that's, rising 8th graders and the current students. And one of, I know the just concerns is thinking about how many sports can a school of our size sustain, in the same season where there are multiple offerings. And I think that's a concern that we need to think about as well. So Mike's, I think, suggestion for if we want to dip our toe in and try this out is to start with a club style team next year that would compete outside of MPA. We would find matches, probably playing local JV and or freshman teams in the area to see if the interest materializes and or grows from what information Mike was able to glean from his survey earlier this year. The kind of, in my mind, decision to be made is there's a pretty big price tag to this, because it's whether you do above ground competition volleyball systems or the poles in the floor, it's a pretty pricey way to start kind of a club program to see if it's going to work. I think on the low end, it's about 22.5, high end is 29. And so I think we need to decide, if this is something that we want to pursue. I do think it relates to the conversation we were just having. There are only, a couple of volleyball programs in the area, right, Mike? Isn't it, Brewer, and then Hamden Academy is with Herman, is that right?
No, it's just Hampton Academy's on their own.
Okay. Is Brewer on their own?
Correct.
Okay, so Brewer and Hamden are the only two with teams, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and we asked Old Town, Bangor,
Herman, John Baptist and Central.
and those are the teams that said, are schools that said we aren't interested. So, you know, it's a opportunity to have something that other schools do not, that might be appealing to students, but clearly we have interest. I think good interest, to have 13 who are raising their hand for something that doesn't exist currently, and we don't have a middle school program in that area either, that other than through physical education, certainly they've learned about the sport. So, that's kind of the ask to determine, you know, if you feel like this is something we should pursue. You know, I think I am optimistic that if we start something that we potentially could gain interest from other schools, if we took the dive to, you know, set up a program, we might have some people willing to join in, but we have no indication right now that there's interest in that for next year. So we shouldn't go into it assuming that's going to happen. Mike, do you have anything to add to that kind of overview of where we are?
I think for three schools, Herman, John Baptist, and Central, the reason for they're not biting is because they're concerned with how it will impact their existing programs right now, and you know, so Bangor, I think, is just not, for some reason, is just not there. Although I did talk to Steven the other night at girls lacrosse, and you know, they're having a little bit more discussion about going the club route as well. They're in their system, it's a 3-year test before they implement anything to the MPA. So, and Old Town just didn't have any interest at the time.
Thoughts?
Oh, I apologize. I think this was the meeting I was in Arizona.
Oh, sorry.
Is this a winter sport?
Fall,
Fall,
And how many on the court at a time? 6?
is it under 6?
correct, 6.
Mike, were you able to tell from the students who indicated interest, how kind of firm that interest was?
Yeah, I you know, there were, I mean, on that list of 13, I would guess that probably 10 of them were ones that were excited, expressed a greater interested, and I felt like we're fairly committed if it was to happen.
And of those 13, do you know how many of them currently play a different fall sport?
3.
So 10 of them
Four.
are not.
Excuse me,
9
4,
are
I'm
not-
sorry, 4.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
9 are not currently in a fall sport.
That's important.
I mean, to me, you know, this is a little bit unique because there's the capital investment for the Nets. But we've had the gym for 40 years, we're gonna have it for 40 more years, right? So, I mean, the capital investment's doesn't give me a pause. We'll have a gym that can play volleyball for 40 years out of it. And the numbers, I'm a big fan of, you know, dynamic growth and change. If we get 6, 7, 8 more students who play sports that didn't play sports, that's a win. If we try it and it doesn't work out, so be it. If we try it and it steals for some other sports, then we're serving student needs and we're serving demand. And, you know, that's the way it goes. Student interests move, and we should be tracking interest, not trying to freeze things. So I personally would be in favor of it, but.
You know, I think, when a couple of years ago, our girls were on the soccer team when and Mark's was as well, when we were in low numbers. There were hardly enough to have a JV. In fact, I think my daughter was a freshman that year, and it's hard to, as a freshman, your only experience maybe is to try to get into a varsity game and maybe have a short scrimmage after. And that's the impact, that's going to happen potentially with low numbers with field hockey and soccer. Cross country, is an individual sport, so it's affected in a different way, maybe with, the team aspect, if you draw students from that. But I think in these other team sports, it will be hard to maintain JV and varsity for both of those sports and volleyball, if volleyball takes off. I know some districts are going, doesn't MPA have a smaller soccer option now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, those might have to be options we look at if that materializes the way it could with our enrollment at the high school going down for a while, so that's just a reality that I think we should consider. But I agree kind of on principle with what you're saying. I just think understanding the reality of it.
Were our JV numbers healthy this year? For
They
both
are,
field
in
hockey
soccer,
and soccer?
they're healthy, and field hockey, aren't they low right now? JV's low?
Yeah, yeah, and that's statewide. That is the sport that has been greatly impacted the most in the fall from the addition of volleyball. So in 2016, when volleyball was introduced as a MPA sport, there were 12 teams, and as of this fall, there were 53 girls teams. So it's, obviously you can't argue that it's a growing sport in the state of Maine. But that is it's a sport that has really greatly impacted field hockey. I can give you just a quick example. Hamden Academy had 47 girls last fall play. And that knocked their field hockey numbers down to about 13.
47 playing volleyball?
Correct.
That's
She
why
kept
they can't
16
take
on
our
the,
students in.
she kept 16 on she kept 16. I just talked to her tonight at the track meet, because she's an assistant track coach, and she kept 16 on the freshman team, 16 on the JV team, and carried 14 on the varsity team.
You can only put 6 players on the court at a time, and they still have that.
It's six players on the court, and it's a different subbing system. It's not like basketball or football where you can sub freely. Mark, if you and I sub for one, and if I come in and sub for you, that's you and I are the only ones that can sub for each other the rest of the game.
Oh, it's like baseball.
What's that?
So it's like baseball then.
And you can go back and forth, but you're paired.
Yes. So the only way that if you start in front of me and I come in for you, the only person you're coming in for is me. And the only person I can go in for is you. It is strictly a positional subbing system.
And is there unlimited number of subs, but like within the pair?
Yes.
Marissa had her hand raised.
Marissa,
I just wanted to ask, while it retains club status, those students who play volleyball, if they so chose, could play a sport as well.
We haven't discussed that.
Yeah.
I just was operating on the idea of like theater as a club, you can also do a sport.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Mercer, I misread that. I thought you meant that if they played another fall sport, an MPA sport, would they be able to play club volleyball?
That was what I was asking. I just didn't know if, like, while people were trying it out, if they still wanted to continue with a field hockey or something, a different fall sport, if while they were attempting, if coaches could work schedule wise to allow for both.
I could imagine with 2 sports that might be hard for practice times, but
Yeah, because I think you'd be traveling to games. In both sports, so I don't know, we haven't talked about that, but
It's not something.
it's probably trickier than theater that is working on rehearsals and then has like one big show, whereas you have to go, I don't know.
So traditionally, you're only allowed to play one sport, but
Correct.
Yeah.
A season.
From the perspective of, the last phase of our conversation, I'm thinking about, how the world is revolving, are evolving, and our students are evolving, and what they want is evolving. And looking at the popularity of this at Hamden, looking at the similar popularity of it at Brewer, and knowing that, as of right now, some of our chief competitors don't have this as an option. It feels like it's moments like this in which we make decisions that are going to shift a tide that we are trying to shift. And, if we had, a student who was looking at BAPS and Orno, but who wants to play volleyball, then that could be the thing that pulls that student. And as we've talked about, pulling one student often means pulling more than one, depending on their circle of friends. And I am eager to problem solve this. I'm eager to change the story that folks have in the region from, word of mouth, which I do not mean to say, Mark, is necessarily negative, right? Because a lot of the folks who talk about why they come here and why they stay, that's also driven by word of mouth, but, shaping it, when I think of the word that, to what you were saying, Brian, the word that defines this place for me is choice. And the idea that we really bent over backward to create a pathway for every student who comes to us and says, the pathway that I need doesn't exist right now. Can we talk about that? Right, and it's what Troy and Holly do. It's what Sam and I do. It's what so many teachers do, like student by student by student. And this to me is one of those moments where we as a district decide, is this a choice we're going to make accessible, or are we going to stick to the choices that are already there?
And the cost is really, 2 tuition students.
Yes, I made that argument when you were out of town, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, not that, yes, exactly. I
Well, and
completely
it's,
agree.
it's a one-time larger investment and then the ongoing costs.
Ongoing costs are, yeah. To be honest, I don't know how we had the last conversation about recruitment and then we hear the trends towards volleyball and we're still, that's just me, but.
I'm with that.
Do we not have those materials?
Not competition nets. It's different than the volleyball nets that PE uses.
They have to be super stiff and tight, so the net can be straight line.
I'm certainly supportive of giving this a shot. I would like, to hear from Mike on what he thinks the best option would be for the nets and not necessarily just go with the cheapest option, but go with the best option, even if it's more expensive. The other thing I'd want to throw out there is if we do this and we're successful in getting our own current students to participate, but also in the hopes of bringing in some tuition kids, I wouldn't be, and we can sustain it on our own. I wouldn't be terribly interested in forming a cooperative after the fact, especially after we've put an initial outlay out there. And we've got enough numbers on our own, I would have zero interest in it.
Well, that's, Mark, that, it's good that you bring that up because that is the #1 reason why our kids, when I explored options for them to play at Ellsworth, Bucksport, Brewer, Hamden, and GSA, was that they have enough kids. And it's pretty hard to look at, as for a coach or an administration to look at their own students that sit in their classrooms and come to school there every day and lose a spot to a kid that is from another district. So
I mean, it's
yeah.
always been our approach to cooperatives is when we don't have enough students and another school doesn't have enough students, it's a win-win, but otherwise we take care of our own students first.
Correct.
Except for the fact that it's not cooperative. What's the word when like our girls go to Bangor to play lacrosse?
Cooperative. We're a cooperative team. We are Bangor, Orono, John Baptist.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Lacrosse?
Yes.
But we don't pay.
No, because we take their Nordic skiers.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have that agreement that it's just a wash.
But then we have situations where it's not a formal cooperative, where it's just, they're letting one of our kids come over and play.
Like, Hamden Alpine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Correct.
So,
That's the only
that-
situation that we have like that.
yeah, for that kind of circumstance,
And actually, if we had 3 boys or girls, we would have a team.
Yeah.
a separate competing team with Hamden.
Well, but I think, you know, to your point, Mark, I don't think it's going to be hard to reach a point where it could get, you know, competitive here to make the team like Hamden's having. And, you know, while Hamden has a team, I bet it's really competitive and hard to get on their team. And so to be starting a program, you may actually draw students who are hoping to make Hamden's team.
And the other thing too is like, if you were to get a situation, and I don't know if this is, it doesn't sound like this is happening at Hamden just yet, but in a situation like that, when kids want to play that sport and can't, and don't make the varsity team, and maybe don't even make the JV team, but are on the freshman team for multiple years, they'll a lot of them will drift to a different sport, right? I mean, we see that with basketball here, right? I mean, basketball every single year here. Once the decisions are made, indoor track gains members, right? It happens every year. And so I suspect that if that were to become the case over time with volleyball, field hockey might bleed some numbers at the outset, but they'll probably get some back.
Yeah.
Later, or soccer, they'll go to a place where there's more kids on the field at once, and where they can be subbed. I don't know what the subbing situation is in field hockey, but in soccer, you know, it's pretty free, and you can, as long as kids can play. So I think this is a good idea. I think we should definitely pursue it. The club option sounds great for the first year, and see what we get for numbers.
No,
Yeah, I think I support this. I think that, you know, I definitely support the students having, you know, the interest in volleyball and the, you know, it doesn't see sort of one-time expense. I guess there's a part of me that feels a little bit, you know, in this tough budget year where we've had to make some sacrifices for, like, you know, the social, emotional, I forget what the line items were that we cut that were like a little bit hard. And then we're gonna put down $20,000-$30,000 on volleyball. Understanding it's, you know, as a one-time expense, it's different from an ongoing expense, so I see that different. I guess, you know, there's part of me that's always afraid of like solving our financial problems by chasing the sort of money in sports, which I've seen in other schools, and, you know, I feel a little bit just uncomfortable with that as like our go-to solution, but that's really general. So that's the only like pause I have, other than like, I think I'm supportive of it, but just kind of like, that makes sense.
It'd definitely be nice to be doing this in a year with a better budget situation. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I don't disagree now, and that's really, I think, a hard part of the choice. We didn't cut anything social emotional,
Well, I forget
but there
what-
were
was
things
something.
that we reduced, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and, you know, it is a year where we're taking a larger tax increase forward. This would have to come from your contingency.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the one time versus ongoing is the key there, right? The ongoing is really next year and the year after, right? Where we just saw we're probably not gonna have matching student numbers, so it's like 3 times X versus X.
Yeah.
But-
But there, I mean, a little like the optics of the feeling of it.
I get you, you're right. Just for the record, I would be making the same arguments if this was about an arts program or a chess team or something else, so.
Yeah.
I think it's particularly important to look at, given, you know, the fact that in the schools that we compete with, only 2 of these schools have a team, right? We know the Hamden numbers are huge, and this is year 1, right, for them, or year 2?
For Hamden?
Yeah.
No, this is year 8.
Oh, really? I didn't think they were that around that one. And what do the Brewer numbers look like? Do you know?
Brewer, they've got 3 teams. They got about 40, 45 girls playing.
Seems like an opportunity for us to attract at least not only our own current students, but maybe peel a few more tuition students we would normally get. And if we get 2, it nets out.
And I think if this is successful, the next question is gonna be about middle school probably. And I do think there are some middle school programs around.
Yep, there are. And
Particularly.
I think we need to
feeding into the
fundamentally,
Brewer. Sorry, go ahead.
I think, you know, we need to decide what route we're gonna go in terms of layout. You know, and the above ground system is, you know, one of the things that we lack in the high school area, in the gym area, is storage. The above ground system is 2 600-pound units.
So that's a no.
What's that?
So that's a no.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it just, it's not so much that they need to be, it's where we put them when we're not using them. And then obviously if we're going with the floor mount system, then that's gonna shut our gym, obviously that's gonna shut our high school gym down for some time this summer, and we've got to find a time to do that.
How long would that be, Mike? Do you have a ballpark?
I do not. I mean, the floor needs to be stripped, and then the new lines need to be put down, and the mounts need to be drilled. The cores need to be drilled down.
I'm guessing no more than a couple weeks.
It shouldn't be.
It's just a matter of getting it scheduled, getting it on the books with
And your
someone.
floors that are both the right age to have to be done anyways. You're in about
Yep.
that time, so it's a good
Oh,
time.
yeah,
to look
no,
at-
it's no question.
All right,
So do you,
Tom is in the long
Yes.
agenda.
do we need
Everybody
to,
good to move on?
I feel like we need a motion.
You wanna, okay, I would motion to authorize proceeding with purchasing of competition quality nets and creation of a club sport for volleyball next year. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Okay, wellness coordinator position.
So when we built our budget, one of the outcomes of our work this year in the wellness committee was to create really a list of ideas for things for initiatives or strategies or approaches that we could consider as a district. And one of the big kind of questions about being able to pursue that is manpower, of trying to figure out who can help move these ideas forward. And so we set aside some money in the upcoming year budget that was earmarked for, or that is earmarked for, the well-being work. And in talking about how to move forward, we are suggesting that we hire a part-time person whose work will be to help shepherd us down the path of implementing what the wellness committee started thinking about and brainstorming, but to really help it get traction, momentum, and take hold in our district. And I think this position, as a number of us, Maddie and BJ and Casey and I went to the wellness conference, and one of the things that we saw in places that are really making progress around this is that they have staff allocated to really be to lead this work in districts. And so we feel like that is important for us to have, to be able to get started. I think there's, this job description, there's a lot on the plate for a part-time position, but I feel like it's what we can afford within the budget that we have, and we'll have to set some priorities to get started. One of the things that we also saw at the wellness conference is that having a committee that's really focused on well-being is probably under the realm of this person's role. And I think it's probably reframing what has traditionally been a wellness committee, and that committee may continue kind of in a different nuance or as a subcommittee of a larger well-being committee. But I think this person would be the person to really lead that work and help make really the brainstormed ideas that came out of that committee begin to happen for us. So I have no idea if we'll get people who say, yes, that is something that I feel like I can do for half-time work. It's hard to attract people to part-time positions, but I think it's worth a try. So this is the job description that we developed, and we want to seek, the board approval to move forward with this position. We see this as it's not an instructional position entirely. It's partly, coaching, it's partly, leading. So it's a real hybrid. And so it's kind of lives outside of, it's a kind of a special purpose contracted on the larger administrative team, probably structure. but more in like a coaching realm, but also a leading realm. Maybe we'll have some, folks internally decide to step up and ask creative ideas for how we can job share with their other roles. I don't know, we have people in the district who have a lot of expertise around this, but no capacity to take on something like this currently. Questions, comments?
I mean, I think you said it, but just to reiterate, this was in the budget and it was transparently in the budget. It was a addition. It was one of the additions we decided to keep, so.
And it still leaves funds in addition to this within what we allocated to, purchase materials or provide, some resources for implementation.
So. You want a motion on this too? It's in the discussion section. But
Yeah, yes, I think we should, but I wanted to see if you had questions. I really.
I mean, I would just say in general that I was for a full-time position, and that's not on the plate here, but I think social emotional learning is never something that should be tacked on. It, as a mathematician, I will say I would trade lots of math for social emotional learning in this world. The things I've needed in my life, I've enjoyed math more, but I failed more at relationships. I don't mean that came out a little too vulnerable. Never mind. Anyway, I think it's an extraordinarily important part, and one of the things I value about Orono is that we do tend to include it a bit more, I think, than some folks, so. That's my support level, it's full on.
all right, not seeing anybody jumping in. I'll make a motion that we approve the position description and authorize the administration to proceed with hiring the position. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor? Pass 5-0. Don't believe we have any co-curriculars. I didn't see any in the folder. So next up, we have a hiring recommendation. I would make a motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A. Appointment of school employees. Is there a second?
A second.
Discussion on the executive session. All those in favor? All right, we'll be back out in 5 to 10 minutes. We go to our secret chamber. Ready to go?
And then this.
I got it. I see what you're saying now. I got it now. And I really written the ELH. That's why I was, because I was trying to do it with ELH.
Are the ones that ever. Oh, yeah, that's funny.
That's, so take a, so put it, this is taken out of there.
This is N one. But yeah, if you put
Yeah.
U instead of. But on the end, it is.
Right, right. Sorry, I'm learning Irish and so.
All right. Ready to come back to order? Meredith, do you have a nomination for OHS math teacher?
Yes, I nominate Ethan Graff for the position of OHS math.
I would make a motion to authorize the superintendent to enter into a contract with Ethan Gaff for OHS math teacher. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Welcome aboard. Next up, middle school math textbooks.
Yeah, Susan has some information to share. And do you want to share your screen or are you just gonna, you can just start there?
Either way, how about I just start? So,
Okay.
in my board report, there were some links to where we are with the process of looking for a new middle school math textbook or math resource for instruction. We started more formally in January with a list of about 17 and narrowed that down to 3 that we were highly interested in. And of those 3, the Desmos Math 6 to A1, which means Algebra 1, was the resource that was felt to most meet our needs for the students and for the teachers both. It is an electronic resource with many things that teachers can print out as PDFs. So they were looking for something that was both electronic and not a consumable to have to pay for every year. We found that the price point of $15 per student per year, which also includes the teacher materials, is pretty good. And so, that's about a $2,500 amount per year rather than an initial $30,000 type of investment. Teachers were really excited about the flexibility of some of the online manipulative tools that come with Desmos as well. Desmos was bought by a company called Amplify a few years ago and really expanded from, you might have heard about Desmos with just sort of a tool to use that with electronics, but really into a whole curriculum. Whole set of resources can be used in the classroom with some really engaging activities for students. Board members have specific questions or would like me to go into more detail?
Anybody have questions?
Do it offer sort of a lot of differentiation to everybody?
It does have a lot of differentiation available right within it, yes. I think that was one of the things that appealed to the one place that it was a little rated lower was for multilingual learners, but other areas for differentiation was really strong.
Any other questions? I would make a motion to authorize the purchase of the middle school math textbooks from Desmos as recommended. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussions or questions?
Just gratitude to the team for the thorough process. I know it takes a lot of time, so thanks to the middle school math team and Susan and Richard for wading through 17 options to begin with.
Indeed. All right, ready to vote? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. Okay, next up, we have some course recommendations. I know there's probably some conversation on some of these. Wanted to check in. My proposal is we take the 2 math courses as a group first, and then we do the 2 ELA courses. Most of the discussion I've heard has been around ELA is that we could go through them one by one, but that would be my proposal. Is everybody amenable to do the 2 math as a unit and then the 2 ELAs as a unit?
Yep.
I would make a motion. We'll have a presentation in a minute. We'll start with motion. A motion to approve the algebra explorations and advanced algebra course proposals as presented. Is there a second?
A second.
We'll start with discussion. Start with.
So I know that board members, and then it was posted on our website, members of the public had access to basically a slide deck giving a history of where we've come from and where we are right now, starting in these conversations. These conversations started many years ago for math, more recently for ELA. For the two math courses, when we looked at what they're offering for math and had conversation with Tracy DeShane and others, we were finding that the course pathway that we had going from, thank you, yeah, I was gonna ask for that slide, but going from flex math to algebra 1 to algebra 2 worked for many students, but not all of our students. And over the years, finding that some of the kids in algebra 2 were really struggling. And so wanting to find some ways that we can meet the students' needs better and still offer a wide variety of courses. And so this is the plan that we've come up with. There are 2 new classes added to this pathway, algebra explorations and advanced algebra. So those are the 2 new pathways there, or new courses that you see on the screen there. Most of our kids would go sort of across the top of that path, math grade 6, math grade 7, and then either pre-algebra or algebra 1. Most of the other kids would go from grade 6 math flex to algebra explorations and then advanced algebra, preparing them for algebra 2 honors in high school. But there's also some dotted lines there showing that there's some flexibility among between the classes. So kids in one class might find that it's not enough of a challenge and can move together. Vice versa, kids might find it's too much of a challenge and move to the math grade 6 class, for example. There are all sorts of other dotted lines that we decided not to put on this chart because it really is possible that kids would move faster through those courses or have a little bit of a different pathway. Basically, what we want to do is offer all of these courses to our students at OMS and make sure that they're in the course that best fits their needs. Next year, we are planning on continuing to have algebra 2 offered at OMS. The year after that, we'll need to look and see what the numbers are. We still want to make sure that we have that as an option for kids, but it might be a class that in the past we've had kids step up into the high school to take a class. So if it's just 1 or 2 students, we might need to do that. If it's a group of students, then we would offer it at OMS. So really trying to be flexible around students' needs. The way that students sort of access each of these different courses is really based on a lot of data that I need to give the math teachers credit for collecting and reviewing and really being very thoughtful of. There are multiple assessments that they look at NWA in addition to the Orleans math, Hannah Orleans algebra predictor test that students take. They ask students that are interested in taking algebra to complete some skills-based sections of IXL to make sure that they have that foundational piece really solid and that the students show some initiative in completing those pieces as well. And then they sit down and look at all the data and make a recommendation for students for the following year. That recommendation is a recommendation and usually it turns out to be right, but there is flexibility there too, where if the students or parents feel it's not the right spot for them, they can have a conversation, meet with the teacher and decide what is best. You know, kind of going to the thought about kids taking risks and stretching, I will share an example that you know, there's some kids in some of those higher math courses right now that we're finding it a real challenge and made an agreement with their family and the teacher to not have the course be for a middle school grade right now because there was no need for a grade. They're going to repeat the class, but they're learning from it and wanted to stay in it. And I really commend them for coming up with that sort of plan that met that student's needs and really allow them to take that stretch and challenge without penalizing them. So the descriptions for the 2 different classes that we're adding, there was a link to those in the board packet. Algebra explorations would mostly be a 7th grade class, but that wouldn't always be the case. We have a couple of really strong math students coming up from ASA next year that this might be the right class for, or may not. We haven't made that determination yet, but it's definitely something that we're talking about. It really focuses on lots of active hands-on learning, building, kind of thinking about concepts in a real world application to start the class and then moves into algebra 1 material in the more theoretical 2-dimensional aspect of things. And then advanced algebra would typically follow that algebra explorations class, goes much more deeply into the algebra one concepts and background that students would need, kind of like an honors algebra one class or an advanced algebra class, so that those kids would be ready for algebra two honors when they get more in school. I don't know if you have questions or wonders.
I would just note for our students too, that it's 8 o'clock, you should feel free if you have other obligations, to go elsewhere, but you're also, as always, welcome to stay as long as you want.
I just have some clarifying questions for I was new to me. I don't remember the pet. So the new courses again are algebra explorations and just taking set algebra 2, you're doing algebra advanced algebra 1.
And that stuff going.
And is algebra explorations retiring a course or just splitting up something new?
The pathway use is currently, like right now, most of the students would go from the grade 6 flex to algebra 1 and then to algebra 2.
Okay.
And that pathway is still available for our students, but we're finding that that stretch of taking algebra 2 in 8th grade is often too much of a stretch for some of the kids. And so we're putting in those two courses, algebra explorations and advanced algebra 1, to give them a pathway that best fits their needs.
And I'm trying to understand like the separation between ELA acceleration and this. It kind of gets blurred in my head. So is this sort of, there's already acceleration at some point going on in math, and is this coming from teachers supported learning?
So yes to both of those. So
Okay.
there is already acceleration going on in math. So the one pathway has been grade 6 math, grade 7 math, grade 8 math. Another pathway has tended to be grade 6 flex, algebra 1, algebra 2. Those have been in place for, I don't know quite the history, but several years now.
Yeah, I
Did I
think that's
answer
the
your
main
question?
difference is the basic notion of acceleration has been long-standing in math at OMS, and this is actually introducing half acceleration instead of, right, keeping full
Yeah.
acceleration, but introducing a half notch of acceleration on top of it.
And
So
I think 4 years ago, maybe Tracy can help remember, we did not offer algebra 2 in the middle school. It was when we had a larger cohort that came along that we moved it into the middle school. And then we just left it there. And what teachers are seeing is that it seems like kids are feeling like, well, I'm on this path and that's where I need to go, and that's not really the right path. And so to offer more options for divergence on that path, whether or not they start out in a flex option or not, giving more options so it's not pushing students too far before they're ready, but it's there for those who need it.
So I guess my question about like the teacher support for this, it sounds like there's overall not as much support among teachers as you pull them for ELA. But if you.
That has been my observation.
I can speak
Yeah.
to that. This is, and we have Mr. Shane sitting right here, but this discussion involved like our math department meeting as like an identified need, right, to increase pathways, because we felt that some students weren't getting their needs met because maybe they're in a class that was over their head and they weren't adequately prepared, and we wanted to provide additional options so that it would help, provide a more solid foundation. So that kids would be more ready when the time it comes for advanced math studies. So to answer your question, yes, this one was driven through conversations with our math team, even I would say at a grassroots level, they kind of grew up through that process, right?
I got a question that it might be for Susan, but it might be better for Richard or maybe even for Tracy. But you mentioned that for next year, algebra 2 will stay in the middle school. And then after that, you'd have to see, right? do you have, I mean, it's a ballpark, obviously, but do you have like even a ballpark figure on how many kids next year would be best served by Algebra 2, and then an idea of how many we might be end up asking to go up to the high school if in fact we start sending them up there, which used to be the practice, as you remember, but it has not now been for a few years.
Yeah, so you want me to answer? So I did just an informal poll of the class, and it was after a quiz on very foundational factoring. I mean, you have to know factoring, and a lot of kids didn't do well. And I could see just spaces in my classroom of like sheer panic of, I'm not gonna know that. And so when this was kind of proposed, I just did an informal poll of if there was other options, what are your thoughts on that? And kind of outlined what could possible pathways. And there was only 4 students that expressed an interest in Algebra 2 next year.
Okay. And would we, do we know that there, for those kids who express interest and are judged to be adequately prepared to take Algebra 2, would there be any issue in getting them into the high school, or is that gonna be not a problem?
I don't think it's a problem, and in speaking with Richard, I agreed, it's gonna give me an extra prep, but I believe there's room in my schedule to be able to still teach this whole course.
Because you are gonna be teaching all of the.
I mean, when you say going to the high school is a problem, I mean, the high school will definitely accept middle school students. The problem is logistics. I mean, that's the challenge.
The
And
schedules.
yeah, it's tricky because
Well,
of,
sure, and that's
so-
kind of what I'm getting at. Are we gonna be able to make this happen? I mean, some of us have been around long enough that we can remember kids going up from the high school to take that. But
Yeah,
it was easier said than done. I mean, it was made to work, but I just want to make sure that we can actually
Yeah.
get this done.
typically we try to find another class that they can take, so they have 2 classes that they're taking, so they don't have, every other day without a class, because it doesn't line up perfectly with middle school. Typically, they'll take 2 middle school classes if they, right?
Yeah, I agreed to, I won't be able to facilitate in study hall, but in place I'll be teaching one of these extra courses, so we'll just need to work out study hall numbers, but it does fit into a middle school schedule.
To have all of these courses taught at the middle school next year.
Thank you.
Marissa?
I just come from I feel like the last cohort to pull a big group of kids here or there, or maybe the first to get Algebra 2. I had a lot of friends who took high school classes because that's who I made friends with. And I know from personal experience, it does cause a few problems, but typically the middle school students that are taking high school classes are very, very, very excited about it. Is when they get to that situation, if they have made that decision, there's so many like hoops you have to jump through of like proving yourself a couple of times and then your parents, and then to sort of get that challenge that you need, it does end up like working in that like SEL side, I guess, is it does boost individuals' morale.
I mean, kind of remarks, I think, I certainly would like to continue to see Algebra 2 at the middle school as a priority, but if it's down to 1 or 2 students, I also agree with Marissa, it's very. I had 2 kids who did it too, it's very viable to pair it up with Spanish or something, and you go up to the high school and it works well enough, so, but I agree that keeping it in the middle school is that. I would like to see that happen as long as the numbers are there, but ultimately, to me. I like diagrams with lots of arrows because I'm about student choice, right? And students finding their fit, and it's not a coincidence. Not because I like it, but because that's what's good for education, that's what's going into our strategic plan. So I see lots of arrows here and that makes me happy.
And there's other arrows that aren't even here, right?
I
You
know.
have to from grade 6 math, flex, or advanced.
Yes, we
algebra,
could.
and
Yeah.
you're right.
This is the clean version of the graph.
Yeah. I think it really does give kids and their parents a lot of options from that.
How often does it happen that people move between those classes in a grade?
In grade 6, at the beginning of the year, it happens fairly frequently. I don't know beyond that. Would you do?
I mean, it depends, right? But basically, like, it's not huge numbers, but. You know, 3 or 4 out of a cohort of say 50, it's, you know, in the beginning of the year, we're looking at making adjustments. And then periodically at different times in the year, but it's not huge numbers, I would say, but. 4 to 6, like throughout the beginning of the year, you say.
Yeah.
And cohort of 50.
One of the things, and I, like Noah, I don't have any experience with the middle school yet. And so I lack some of the history around acceleration. And I don't care for the term acceleration either. Because my concern would be, you know, thinking of acceleration literally, it's increasing our rate of change. And then once we get into some groups, you know, at some point, making up the difference isn't gonna be feasible. So those dotted arrows concern me that maybe within the beginning of the year, there's some permeability, but at some point, a kid's not gonna wanna catch up on 4 extra months of math. So if a decision is made too early, there's no official tracking, but I worry about, for all intents and purposes, is it unlikely they're gonna say, you know what, I want this so bad, I'm gonna work triple time to catch up with my peers who've been doing this for 6 months or 9 months, especially in math. But in any subject, you know, that distance just starts growing, and that's concerning to me. And in all honesty too, I want to be very transparent. I'm advocating for opportunities for my kids at ASA who have struggled with peers, whose behavior problems interfere with their learning. My kids are very compliant, they're very curious, they're in a house full of graduate degrees. You know, I'm down there lobbying for opportunities for my kids. And so in many ways, this appeals very much to my household. They would definitely jump into some of these tracks that stretch learners, that challenge them, that grow them. But I do worry about that separation. At the same time, wanting those same opportunities. I'm trying to just be very transparent that I'm very torn in terms of the concerns I've heard and also the things that I would do to advocate for my own children.
Can I answer?
I'll make it rules. I think we're gonna have a long night, so I'd like to I'm actually thinking we should go ahead and vote on this one, because I think there's gonna be a lot more, unless somebody's got a strong statement. I think we're gonna end up with a fairly big conversation on the next one, and I mean, I guess they're all blended together to me, so it's hard for me to separate. I get the fact that ELA is newer, but I'm coming at the whole acceleration thing. Sorry, everyone, I'm still new. I have issues that range across the topic, so.
If I might just address you around the math, I think the spirit here in adding additional coursework is to avoid like sort of a tracking model where kids get stuck in, you know, algebra 1 and then I need to go to algebra 2 no matter what, whether I'm ready or not, right? You know, the newer courses kind of like fill a void, if you will, in between kind of steps, so that I think it's an expansion of pathways and options for kids in that way. That's kind of how I see it, and that's sort of the spirit of the original discussion in proposing these additional pathways policies.
Right, so most of this is already in place. And if anything, we're adding half
Just the
steps.
2 courses.
We're
are
putting
new.
2 things that are sort of in the middle of this.
Yeah, just the explorations and advanced algebra are new.
And
All right,
it's
so the
that,
6th grade stuff is already there.
it's that
Yes.
exact problem that I wanted to address with the algebra explorations class. So algebra explorations is gonna start with project-based learning for half the year, and only semester 2 will we jump into algebra. So it gives an entire semester where some kids aren't gonna miss out on content, because especially if they did 6th grade flex, it's the same topics, but we're gonna do it in project-based learning environment to really dig into those pieces. That way there's a lot more movement that can happen later in the year without them missing. And then half a year of algebra 1, they can experience it. If they don't like it or they don't do well in it, then they could actually go full year algebra 1, 8th grade, or go advanced algebra to continue where they left off the year before. So they could actually have some movement there as well. So there's gonna be some chances for overlap that weren't there before, so that way that bridge closes. And I think that's been the problem with the ELA, if we're gonna bridge there, those types of bridges, because of the stepwise functionality of math teaching is not the same as ELA teaching, and I won't speak that I'm no expert in that at all. But that's the steps that we were trying to like overlap.
Both of those comments help. I think I can move on and then I'll say my comments for the next part. So we ready to vote on the math at this point? All right. This is gonna be a long meeting, folks, so I don't want to keep administrators up until 10, so. All those in favor of approving the 2 math courses? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next up, anybody have a problem with bundle? I think we almost have to bundle the 6th and 7th grade together because one of them couldn't stand without the other. So I will do the same thing. I would make a motion to approve the new courses ELA Flex 6 and ELA Flex 7 as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Now we will enter conversation. Susan, you probably have the floor first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you don't mind starting with that slide, and I can't go through the whole spiel if you would like, but I think we'll just start at sort of one of these endpoints. And I want to follow the thread, I guess, of your conversation a little bit earlier tonight when you thanked people for speaking up, because I think that's one of the things that's really important in this district, and that we value diversity and we value inclusion. And we work with both of those things to help make opportunities more equitable for our students and our staff. And when we value diversity and we value inclusion, that also means we value conflict. And I think this is one of the cases where that conflict, I hope, can be productive and we end up in a place that feels right for us. But I appreciate the different viewpoints that have been brought to the table. And I also can say that I appreciate that you're in a situation, you know, it's a hard decision to make. You're not making a decision from a very clear right and wrong, but 2 possible rights. And so thanks for being thoughtful about this. So the writing across the disciplines class that you see there in the blue block on the far end is an accelerated English language arts class that has been in place for our 8th grade students to take last year and this year. We're planning on continuing to have that next year, and have found that kids that leave that class sometimes portfolio out of needing to take expository writing in the high school. And we didn't know that when we started down this adventure of what does writing across the disciplines mean for high school, other than a possible elective credit, but what does it mean for ELA? Until we looked last spring at the student work, and as a group of English language arts teachers from the high school and Meredith Diamond and myself really reached the conclusion that the students' work was exhibiting some really great writing, and that we wanted kids to have a 9th grade ELA experience, but it's possible that they would be exempt from expository writing. So I think we had 8 students who, of the 11 who were exempt from expository writing. They did all start in 9th grade ELA this school year. And during that conversation last spring, we had decided that we wanted to give students the opportunity to potentially portfolio out of the second half of grade 9 ELA. And that also decision was so that students that were new to Orono could have an opportunity for some acceleration as well. So I have to look back at the slide, but I think we had about 6 of those students that took the writing across the discipline submitted a portfolio to opt out of the grade 9 second semester, and some opted to stay in to the grade 9 second semester. So we do have some kids that are taking expository writing now as 9th graders, and we have some students that are taking what has been seen more as elective ELA classes now as 9th graders as well. So that's kind of the end result of that change to including writing across the disciplines. I think Orono is in a very unique situation in a lot of ways, because we do have a very bimodal population. And when we look at our data, the grade level span in a single class for English language arts and math, but for English language arts in particular, is really quite huge. And it's really hard to meet those students' needs in a single class. So this current school year, we have students that are taking the writing across the discipline as 8th grade as eighth graders, and we have 5 students who are in 7th grade taking 8th grade ELA, so they accelerated up into the 8th grade ELA class. And as we explored this more, starting this winter, we found that kids were missing some things from the 7th grade experience that teachers really wanted them to have and that they felt were really important for them to have. And so we talked about several different ideas, and the one that's presented to you here tonight is to have a flex 6th grade ELA class and a flex 7th grade ELA class that make sure that we continue to provide students with experiences that are grade level experiences and special for that grade level without having them up into another grade level, as well as being able to add to their courses some material that's more in depth. And in particular, I think some of the independent work, some of the research around conducting research and inquiry-based projects, rather, that's going to be very unique to the flex classes. One of the things that we learned was a mistake, and it was to use the word application. And I think that application came about in the first year of writing across the disciplines, because we did and were thinking about ways to get the program started and ways to have these are the kids that are in and these are the kids that aren't. And that limited the number of students that took writing across the disciplines the first year. We continue to use that word application, but would like to reframe that to be more of an expression of interest or a demonstration of interest. The application itself for kids to take writing across the discipline and, or what was the form itself, it used to be called an application, writing across the discipline, and the grade 7 flex really asks the kids about 4 questions. Why are you interested in taking this class? What sort of genres do you like to read and write? This is going to be a harder class. How do you handle challenges? What support do you think you need? And then it also asks the students to name 1 or 2, depending on the grade level, teachers who know them well and could fill out an inventory about their learning styles and their learning habits. In addition to that, kids also did a take-home essay and had time to do a finished product, an opinion essay over several days. This current year, we wanted to be more equitable in our process, and the middle level teachers recommended that we have all students write an essay to show their writing skills. It's a draft, it was in 1 class period down at ASA, 2 class periods at the middle school, but that gives everybody a chance to have their writing screened. We also look at NWA scores and how the students are doing it in class too. Our intent is that we make a recommendation to the students and their families. We recommend that you've expressed interest. This is going to be a real stretch for you. You're going to have to work really hard. But we recommend this class might be a good challenge for you. We recommend this class is going to be good for you, or we might say we recommend that you take 8th grade ELA instead of writing across the discipline, or 7th grade ELA rather than 7th grade flex. We see that as an opportunity for more conversation with the family, the parent, the student, and the teacher to think about if that opt-in challenge is maybe the right thing for them or not. It doesn't mean it's a hard no or a hard yes necessarily. One of the things that the middle school teachers that are teaching these classes asked was about that flexibility, those dotted lines between moving into and out of ELA flex and for 6th grade and 7th grade, and wanting to have that on an individual basis when the conversation was needed or warranted, as well as some points in time to look at those decisions and really think about those classes as whether or not they were the best fit for those kids. So when progress reports come out, and then at the end of the first quarters are times that we set with them as a chance to look at the groupings to see how they're working and if they're meeting students' needs. I will share that sometimes kids get in the writing across the discipline or one of the higher level courses at OHS, and start taking it and then realize that it's hard for them. And usually the teacher doesn't have to have that conversation. The student will come and say, you know, maybe my life is too busy with lacrosse right now. I'm gonna do a switch and take a class that's not quite such a stretch for me. We anticipate those types of conversations could happen at the middle school as well, but it might be a little bit more teacher driven. Based on what they're seeing in the classrooms and how they're feeling the students are doing. Put my notes here and see what else.
I think so. The one other thing is, like, we learned from, it's sort of an evolution, right? Like I think over the last couple of years and how we implemented acceleration, if you will. One thing we tried this current year is have a number of seventh graders in an eighth grade class, in an eighth grade ELA class. And that worked out well for those students. So I think the teaching was well done. It was a good experience. But one thing we realized was that there were some elements of maybe disjointedness with seventh grade, like you lost that kind of continuity of keeping students together in the grade level cohort, right? For special projects and stuff. So we made it work, but it wasn't totally smooth. And I think so. That's an example of one of the adjustments that we want to move away from. And the other thing that I wanted to note is that in our flex classes, we want to open it up to students to take on the challenge if that's something that they're interested in, but also keep the rigor high, right? Like don't lower the bar, if you will, in those particular classes, because they should be designed to challenge kids, and that's kind of that's the setup of it. So, but as far as I think movement within the group and without the group, we want to keep that as flexible as possible. But we try to learn from current implementation and the pros and the cons of that.
So the group that are taking writing across the disciplines now, if you just looked at their NWA scores, you would see that there's quite a variety, and as well as the group that are in eighth grade taking in seventh grade taking ELA, grade 8 ELA right now. And there's a range of scores there too, there's a cut score. And one of the things that we anticipate will happen was that we'll need to have some conversations with students and parents that you're interested in taking this class, it's going to be a challenge for you. You're going to need to work hard. If you work hard and don't get an A, how are you going to feel about that? What's that going to be like for you? And to see if that's what they want or not. And there will be some kids, I think, that really do want that challenge and will work hard and maybe they will earn the A, but not have the grade be necessarily the end point. And I think some of that more conversations will happen as we move into our strategic plan and talk about grading and what grades mean and what grades don't mean. But we're picturing some conversations like that with students and parents as they try a stretch and take a risk or decide also maybe not to, that their lives are busy and they don't want to take that flex class or writing process. I think the last piece of information I just want to add is we had 28 students who expressed interest in taking writing across the discipline, and we anticipate that we will need to have 2 sections of that next year. So we've seen that class grow and take shape as kids and parents learn about what it means to take writing across the discipline. We did say in the letters to parents that we were anticipating the possibility of adding, at that point, the class was called Honors Grade 7 ELA and Honors Grade 6 ELA. After conversation with the curriculum committee and then going back to the ELA teachers, we decided to name that Flex. Kind of flex your muscle, and there's some flexibility there. And it was also mirroring the grade 6 flex math language. We had 16 students who filled out the interest survey and were interested in taking grade 7 flex next year. And we had 16 students who teacher recommendations from ASA said that this class might be a good fit for students, but we haven't looked at all their data yet for those 5th graders going into 6th grade. We decided not to have the kids do the interest form for 5th grade into 6th. At this point, the 5th grade teachers thought that added a little bit of a layer of stress to them, that maybe those fifth grade students were thinking sixth grade is a little bit big and scary right now. So all students did the essay and we're told that this essay was just to help middle school determine what's gonna be, what you know about writing. And the fifth grade teachers felt that the kids did a nice job with taking that seriously, but not getting too stressed out about it either.
So if we can, maybe we could just start with factual questions, and then I know this will launch into philosophy pretty quickly, but I did have two factual questions, and maybe other people do. So I mean, just to be clear to the board, right, this is the context of a course approval. Course approvals do come to the board, right, and we can vote yes or no, obviously, or it wouldn't be worth bringing it to us for a vote, but we're not designing courses here or anything like that, right? That's not the process through which courses get created. Teachers design courses. So I guess my question, Susan, is if there was a no vote, what does the middle school, is there still time for teachers to rejig something else, or are we going back to last year, or is that an unknown question at this point?
I think it's a bit unknown at this point. I would anticipate that if there's a no vote for adding the two flex ELA courses, that we would want to go back particularly to the students that express interest in taking flex 7, and that we felt flex 7 would have been a good fit, looking at those students to see if accelerating to grade 8, like we do right now, is an option for them. And I think it would be an option for them. It's an option for kids this year, not necessarily an ideal one, but should be an option for kids next year. The grade 6, coming up into grade 6, I'm not sure about.
Yeah, a discussion. I guess my other question, and I think Kevin and Tracy both already hinted at this, but my presumption is since ELA is less of a scaffolded field than math, right? You have to learn how to factor before you can learn how to find roots of quadratic equations and things like that. There's scaffolding in ELA for sure. You have to learn how to write sentences before you can write paragraphs and things, but as a less scaffolded subject, those dotted lines are could be more active and possible through the entire year than they would be in math. Is that a reasonable assumption, or?
I think that's a reasonable assumption to a degree. And so, yes, I think there could be more flexibility between those classes, but I also think, you know, in our last conversation that was an ELA department meeting, and not everybody could attend because there were lots of things going on in their lives, but in the conversation with the 3 teachers who are slated to teach the advanced classes next year, we talked quite a bit about what that means for kids and classes that are not those advanced classes, and really wanting to take a deep look at what those classes, what those skills are and how to scaffold those skills, as well as what are some interests potentially of students that we could draw into the course development, so that there might be some different things that kids do in the 6th and 7th grade ELA classes to help both with that scaffolding and with broadening some options for them as well, and increasing that engagement and interest.
Great. Any other questions, specific factual questions?
I guess I just on the decisions for how they get into the course. So far, just the writing across disciplines is the one that exists.
Yes.
You've had some process for making recommendations. I guess I'm wondering about the cases where you recommend that they don't go up to writing across the discipline, but they say, no, I want to. And they come to you and say, like, no, I want to do this.
So we've had that in both writing across the disciplines and with students that are taking 8th grade ELA as a 7th grade student. And those students ended up taking the class because that's what they wanted to do and that's what their family wanted them to do, and learning things in those classes. And I think it was still maybe difficult for those kids, but they definitely showed that they learned things and they wanted to be there. And in that last ELA department meeting that I was referring to, one of the epiphanies, I think epiphany was the word used, was kind of thinking about these accelerated options for kids as homogeneous in the sense that they all want to be there and they're wanting to work hard and they're wanting a challenge. But maybe a little more heterogeneous in where they're coming in for ability.
Well, if we had a world where you didn't make any recommendations, where it completely, you lay out all the options for the students and they pick. Would you think that would recreate sort of what the pool of students who come in now, or do you think, what would be wrong with that model?
I think that kids don't know what they're opting into quite yet, right? Because they don't have experience with these classes and we don't have experience with these classes. I think they do know what writing across the disciplines is and involves in order to opt into that. And thinking about some of what I've heard and learned about AP courses at the high school, right? So when a student wants to take an AP course, it's my understanding that they need to have a teacher of that content area kind of sign off on a form that says, yes, this student could and should take that AP course, or let's have a conversation about this. But the student still has that option, and there's still that teacher and administrator and parent decision and conversation around some of those AP courses for kids. But they have been in place long enough for kids to know what they're opting into. I think with that, there needs to be some questions with those students and those parents as well. Like, what do you want to get out of this class? So you're opting into this class. What do you want from it? What kind of challenge? What are you hoping to gain from this? Do you want to accelerate into courses at the high school more quickly? So what do you want from this class? What effort or work are you willing to put into this class, and what supports will you need in order to make this all successful for you? So that kind of conversation, and to me, goes to a student success plan conversation, right? That you're opting into this class and it might be a stretch for you, but you want to take that stretch, and here's what you're going to do to work for that, and here's how we're going to help support you. We did have, part of a conversation at one point is maybe we just let middle school kids opt in for classes just like we do at the high school. I don't think we're quite ready for that yet, but it is definitely something that we've talked about, and I think we can still consider.
Other questions? We can get philosophical. Go for it. Start off the philosophy.
Hey, Brian. I guess, again, I'm coming late and I realize 9/10 of all this structure is in place. This is just approving or not approving 2 courses. But I do have some concerns, around the language. I have real concerns about words like advanced, accelerating, phrases like lowering the bar. And I don't think they're poorly intended, but I think they're just built into the kind of the way we're thinking about this. And I'm not trying to design courses, but there are ways of stretching students and enriching their curriculum that doesn't involve going ahead. And definitely doesn't, kids know what groups are. So, my kids have occasionally been separated into groups and ASA based on pre-assessment scores. There's very little movement between those groups, even though practically speaking, it can happen. They find out super quick who are the kids in front and who are the kids behind. And even if they're not making that into some sort of hierarchy of value, they know who the advanced kids are. And at least some of these middle school kids know that too. And school is so wrapped up in identity that to start thinking about, well, I'm not advanced, I'm not accelerated. The bar has been lowered for me because I'm not in that class. I do appreciate the use of flex. So I can see there's some attention being paid to how we phrase these things. But I think this is important. Again, coming from a parent who's going to try to, pry open the box to make sure my kids are stretched and challenged. I don't know anything about ELA, I can't comment on that directly, but as a mathematician, lots of lateral exploration, I can't undo anything. But you don't have to have the next course to be deeply challenged. So that concerns me a lot. I worry about these ramps. And again, I'm definitely conflicted.
And I do worry about the teachers that spoke about the development time. If it's the case that the mathematics curriculum took a longer time to work out the tweaks, and they're still being worked out by the creation of those 2 new courses. If this is being rushed, I don't know.
I guess I'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, please.
So this really started, as a pathway when we realized we could have more flexibility around serving students who were previously only served in chapter 104. And with our population there, it seemed quite arbitrary to have to say, sorry, you can't get services when you're 1% different than this kiddo who gets services because of our, cluster that we have of high achieving students. Never felt like the right thing to do. The state relaxed the requirements around only serving 3 to 5%. And so we began to think about what could that look like for ELA, because there were students who were having acceleration opportunities already in math. And our chapter 104 teachers saw some potential to offer this course for students without them having to go to the high school. Like we talked about in math, it's really more ideal to allow students to accelerate and stay in the middle school if possible, for social reasons and logistics. And so we started this course 2 years ago, and really when we began to see feedback from students and hear from other students who didn't have this experience. I remember Dorsa talking about this, from her own personal experience about how difficult it was sometimes to be pulled for, enrichment services and it not be connected to what you're doing or having to go to the high school. And so trying to find ways to offer programming that's more connected to the classroom and what peers are doing. And so we saw the success from that model. We decided to think about, well, how could we expand what these 8th grade students are getting to offer something for 7th graders and possibly 6th. So Katie did a lot of research on models, and we talked about that with the middle school staff that year. And I think there was hesitation and concern about expanding acceleration. You heard them talk about that. And we looked at options that would be able to be feasible for starting that year, which is now this year. And the accelerating into the upper grade level seemed to be, resource wise, an easier thing to try to test to see how it worked and if it met the same needs that we were seeing writing across the disciplines meeting. And while, as Susan said, it feels like it was successful for the students who accelerated, logistically, it had issues. And I think middle school staff felt like there could be maybe a different way to do this, almost kind of like, well, if we have to do this, then maybe this other way is a more, it doesn't have some of the issues we're seeing with this model. So, that's why I guess I take a little exception to people saying, they weren't consulted, because I think, there were disagreements on whether or not we should be offering these advanced courses. But when I see feedback from students talking about how this acceleration has been transformational for them, I think, why wouldn't we try to serve the student and then, in this other grade as well, to see if it can be transformational for a longer period of time for these students. And so really the challenge has been finding what the right fit is. And I think with middle school, there was a decision made that we're going to go down this path, and it wasn't an easy one, but we started down a path, and that's what we've been doing with ELA, starting down a path, and each year really making adjustments based on what we're seeing. So I guess it sounds like it's really sudden, but it's been a really gradual kind of trying one thing, assessing it, seeing if we can make tweaks to make it better. And I feel like that's where we are really in year 3 of this. So I don't feel like it's sudden, and I feel like people have been asked, but I think there's a fundamental disagreement from some people that gets in the way of maybe feeling like they were listened to. And so that's how I view the process over 3 years, really. And I think that at some point, when we talk about multiple pathways, there may be different visions for how that looks. And I think trying something that students have said was really one of the most impactful courses they took in middle school, to see if we can help make that more impactful for more years is worth trying. And I think it has the potential of making instruction better for all kids. I mean, I think philosophy-wise, people can disagree with that, but I've seen it work beautifully places. And I also feel like, if I have a child who has more learning needs, their needs are probably going to be met in a more targeted way when they're not sitting in class with, a student who read the book that was assigned last night and is telling me everything about the book. And I know there are ways around that pedagogically, but it's a harder ask. And I think it makes the job easier to meet the needs of those students. And I think it helps us meet needs like Dorsa had described. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
But when you spoke in the wellness committee about your experience and how you found a student who was pulled away from peers, in an enrichment model, that's pretty impactful. And that's kind of that's really the feedback that we heard on that model and why we really moved away from an enrichment model.
Can I just
Marissa?
clarify?
Sorry, go ahead.
Just a quick clarify, so this is replacing 104, or is this?
So 104 exists, and it really exists in a kind of in the middle and high school as a kind of a success plan model. We create a plan for students as to how they're going to, find opportunities. And sometimes it's through a course. And sometimes it's through, Katie Quirk also started the middle school science fair opportunity for students. So it can look like different pieces, but it's in its best version, it's not enrichment. And that's really what the research shows.
So replaces enrichment as the answer to 104?
I think it's an alternative, yes.
I mean, for the longest time, 104 was capped at 3 to 5% of your population. It's not the state population, it's your population, right? And the problem is in Orno, we had 20% that might have, proclivities and interests in this direction. And so I remember those days where, one parent's like, well, my kid got a 213 on the NUIA and your kid got a 214 and they're getting services and my kid's not getting services. And how can you rationalize that? I had more to do with who was hungry the day they took the test versus who wasn't hungry the day they took the test. It was extremely inequitable. And so, and now the state has kind of opened the gate that I think we still identified 3 to 5%. And something's like an IEP, right? There's a meeting and a learning plan for that 5%. But we're able through these kinds of classes and enrichment is a resource intensive model, right? We're not going to be able to pull out, even if we wanted to. And I agree with Meredith, the research is extremely strong that enrichment and differentiation are not as effective as acceleration. I mean, it was one of the slides we got, but even if we wanted to, we couldn't pull out 20% of the class. So this is a way of addressing that 20%. Marissa.
Hi. I am a pretty solid example of accelerated English language arts, but did not make the 5% cutoff for 104 program. When I left Glenburn, I was in the 104 program, identified as gifted and talented, and when I entered Orno, I was no longer a part of that. So that is one of my first questions, is as a student, that you're not being decelerated, you're being given a second step to go through that. It hurts, especially when you're in middle school and everything is personal somehow, even if it's not. It would hurt one of those students who are going into, let's say, grade 7 ELA or a grade 6 that thinks they're going into a grade 8 ELA to get put in a grade 7 ELA flex. because what they're being told is, oh, you're actually not what you thought was going to happen. The plan that we had set out to you when you started in sixth grade, we've changed it. And from the sounds of it, some of their peers would be accelerated to grade 8. And I just would like that to be considered too, of the emotional component of that, especially when this age group is one of the most emotional and takes things very personally. And I know I did during this time as I reapplied to 104 during middle school and was rejected. So that is something I'd like everyone to think about. I'd also like you to think about non-choice paths. We talk a lot about just in my group of friends, the philosophy of what a parent wants versus what a student wants, and how those two things are different and how those two things are not often equally considered. So if a parent encourages a student who maybe gets really good test scores, hey, you could totally do this. I want you to, challenge yourself, and I want that for you. And this student feels as though looking at the rest of their course load, that's a poor decision. I just want to make sure that if these classes are implemented, both the student and parent voice are taken at equal value at the very least. And in my opinion, the student voice should be elevated above the parent voice. But that's because I'm a student and not a parent. Then also, I think the language, Mr. Kevin said, the language of accelerated or advanced or any of those things shouldn't, if these classes get implemented, go into the marketing of those classes or anything like that. Because the idea of an accelerated leads to the idea of a decelerated. And nobody likes to be told that they're in the slow class. So I think if you're gonna call stick to flex or a challenge class or a stepping stone class, any of those things that encourage more of a growth mindset than a competition mindset. Because I am a kid that got put into tracks in various different places in high school, as I was told, and in middle school, where this is where you're supposed to go. And I followed that blindly. So positive communication throughout this process would also be something I would encourage. That once a kid gets into grade 8 flex, or grade 6 flex, saying to them, well, oh, the next step is grade 7 flex, is maybe not a great choice. Just that's my 2 cents, I suppose.
Great, thanks. I'll take a swing at philosophy. First I have to say, this is not my first rodeo with this debate. I was here 10 years ago when there was a much more vituperative debate, and I know some of the rest of you were too. And I'm glad that this debate is not going down the path of that debate, not because of the outcome, but because of just it wasn't healthy for the district. I hear people say it's for 5% early group of kids. That bugs me because it's 20%. I don't know how you can, plus or minus, might be 70% or 28%, but it's a real chunk of kids in Orono. But I hear people say, well, if you're doing this, you're pulling resources away from other students. That's just not actually true. I mean, I know teachers maybe have an extra uptime, there's little things around the margins, but acceleration is the one thing that's not requiring extra resources. And I also find that whole conversation kind of odd. Nobody stands up here and says, why are you putting extra resources into special education students or Title I students? The answer is we do it because there are students who have needs and we're serving those students. So I find that whole conversation, to be honest, that's the most disappointing point to me of all, is that we start to pit students against students, and students are just kids. Kids need to be addressed and taught as individuals. And if there's a need, we need to be talking about how to meet that need. Heard the word inclusive a lot. Where I come from, the word inclusive means you have a ramp so everybody can get in the building. You have, accommodations on test times. Inclusive does not mean treating everybody identically. Inclusive means specifically treating all members of the group in a way such they can be in the group in an engaged and active fashion. And so those are just my pet peeves. I'll move on. And I haven't heard any of those things said here in this room tonight, so this is not addressed to anybody in this room, but there is so clearly evidence of a group of students who learn substantially from whatever you want to call it, acceleration flex. Personally, I like the idea of just a hardworking class, but whatever it is, the evidence is just so strong. Right, that slide from Hattie, which is kind of the gold standard Bible in education. Each of those bars is dozens and dozens of studies. You guys, I think know what meta-analyses are. Hold it together, and the effect sizes, differentiation, and enrichment are 0.2, which is down just above statistical noise, below the effect of a teacher. And the effect size of enrichment is around 0.8. It's the same as things we do in special ed. It's huge. And then you look at our own student surveys, and there are all these, our parent surveys, and there are all these stories from kids about, I was bored and then I was challenged. There's stories from parents about my kids were behavioral problems and then they were challenged and there's not. There's stories from parents about my kids were actually having mental health problems because they were bored. And this is a story I've lived a bit personally, with somebody in my family. And, the mental health problems went away when they stopped being bored and when they had peers that had an equal amount of focus. There are substantial individual benefits for a group, let's call it 20% of our students. And I don't know how we can have a conversation without talking about those benefits. There's costs, so let's have a conversation, but it's a cost benefit conversation. When I don't hear the benefits entering the room, my antenna go up and I start to worry about what kind of a conversation we're having. But just the evidence from our survey, from the national evidence, my anecdotal evidence from having put 2 kids through middle school, and this is totally not a commentary on teachers, it's commentary on middle school. And, kind of as you said, Kevin, there's divergence that's happening through time. And by the time you get to high school, you can pick your class. And so the whole problem just kind of disappears off the cliff. But that's oversimplifying. But middle school is just kind of a peak point just structurally because of middle school, the ages that kids are. And, until we can have a conversation about here's these benefits, here's these costs, I don't know how to have a conversation. When I don't hear the benefits being mentioned, I don't know how to carry on the conversation. So what are the costs? I mean, the most common cost I hear is social identity, right? And I don't know, that's real. I don't know how big it is though, to me, that's the conversation to have is how does that weigh against the benefits? And first off, you're right, middle school kids are hyper-focused on social identity and they already know who's on the varsity team and who's on the JV team. They already know who gets good grades in their class and who doesn't get good grades in their class. I think the language is important. I totally agree with that point, but they already know most of these things that we're talking about. Also, speaking to somebody who is in some of these accelerated classes in middle school, mostly you get made fun of because you're in the minority, right? You're outside the mainstream. So it's, I don't know, the notion that it's hurting the big group of kids. I don't know, it's not in the national evidence. I'm sure it's real for some kids. I'm very sure it's real for some kids, but there's not this big pile of evidence that there's this big social crisis that happens to student identities because they're in this class instead of that class, especially when they're still with the majority of the class. But to me, that's the only balance that it's rational to talk about is this, identity piece versus this opportunities to learn and grow piece. And the evidence on learning and growing and there is evidence on social emotional benefits for the students who go into these classes. So has to be a cost benefit conversation to me, and the benefits are huge and the costs are really intangible. And, but I don't know, it's pretty clear to me where I come down, but Marissa.
I just want to talk about culture of ortho specifically. So, within the national average, I'm sure, I personally haven't looked into those numbers, that probably kids who are put in accelerated classes, I'm sure in the past that was, the whole nerd v jock, 90s movie fiasco. Within the Orono High School and Orono Middle School and ASA, there is this very interesting social hierarchy regarding intelligence. And not real intelligence, because everyone is individual and smart in their own way, and that should be accepted, but perceived intelligence. And how, one of the things that, most kids from out of districts that I've spoken to, find very surprising is that, most of our high-performing, sports members are also high-performing academic members. And those who are in those high-performing classes are perceived within the social hierarchy. So I think something that's hard to dismiss. I do agree that there are positives to come with accelerated courses. I have benefited from a lot of that. But a big thing within the Orno system is perceived identity from the entire system, what reputation means and what is valued. So in the Orno system, we put a lot of stock into I can't remember what it's called. We did it a couple of times, the ideal student or the ideal learner. And one of those biggest things is like challenged and things in that capacity. I apologize if my thoughts are a bit rambling. I think what needs to be understood is that when students are accelerated and students are unaccelerated, like you use the term hard worker class. And I think one of the most important things is thinking about the flip side of the language that is used. The implication of a hard worker class is the implication of a not hard worker class. And that can shoehorn students into no longer caring about school because they are not receiving what they believe is fair terms. I believe that all of our teachers are working to the best of their ability to meet every single student's needs, because I've seen it. I've seen them at the printers well past when they should be here. I think what hurts as a student is being classified as lower. So if these classes exist, if they need to exist, because you said 20%, that's a huge number of students. Like, it's intangible to me because I can't see the numbers of like what 20% looks like in our school district. But realizing that 80% of students, you are putting in like just the language that's been used tonight, the non-hard worker class, the less accelerated class, the easier class, things like that can hurt. And things like that don't make sense to me. Just on the basis that if there have been opportunities in the past to get students to where they need to be, what has changed in the past 3 years, you said, that has provided these new opportunities that are so important to hit right now, and that these are the best that we think we can come up with.
I mean, that's a good call on the hard worker. I appreciate that. Just wanted to expand on what I meant. I'm kind of live in the world that you are in, Noah, and I think you expressed, Marissa, and even I think I was riffing off of what you said, Richard, about the epiphany, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it were up to me, I would have no gateways, and it would be entirely student parent choice. Which of these classes, right? And they would be differentiated. Less so on ability, more so on interest and amount of time, which is what I meant by hard worker, but the amount of time a student chooses to devote to a class, right? And, you know, but I take Meredith's point that this is a process and, you know, the math process is clearly more evolved. So to me, that's an argument to start the process with ELA, not to wait or delay the process on ELA. I really think, this, to me, the end point is a range of classes and student choice. Right? I don't know how we can describe that as a losing conversation. And I do think the language is very important. And, you know, obviously I already stepped in and made a very bad one, but I do think Flex is about the best we have right now. But as it becomes more about student choice, it's about the class where you want to put a lot of time and energy into the class, and the class where you, for many various reasons, don't want to put as much time and energy into that subject. I think that's the framing that's the most powerful and the most accurate, to be honest. And I think, you know, so to me, that's where I would want to head, is a full parent student choice model. right? And it's based on social emotional development and personal preferences, and is this my favorite subject or not my favorite subject, and is school my favorite thing, and I want to do it a lot of time at school, or I don't, right? To me, that's where we want to head, but, to me, this is, progress towards that. It's not perfectly there yet, but that's progress towards that. I will shut up. Anybody else who hasn't spoken, or Kevin, you can speak to, but anybody else who wants to speak?
You got a lot of things written down. Yeah, I wasn't looking forward to tonight. It's a hard decision and hard sort of process. I appreciate everyone. Put in, one of the things I'm really torn here in a lot of ways, and you're part of it here. There's this encompassing piece of like, Meredith, you're making this recommendation strongly, and I really trust you. And like, I also really trust the teachers who I've heard in a lot of the communication, there's this like email, like we need to just trust the teachers so they know the students best. And like, I feel like this conflicted, like I don't trust somebody if I make the wrong decisions here. And like, it feels like a not healthy place to be as a community. And I don't know that there's any way around that. There's a part of me that's like, I want us to be in a place and making this decision where we've come to agreement in a way that doesn't feel like I'm saying I don't trust somebody, if I choose one way or the other. So there's like, that's sort of like behind the scenes for me. I really think everyone's doing a great job with what they do, and I believe in their teaching, I believe in your leadership. So I guess, there's a couple things that just like came up tonight in the conversation that weren't the things I was thinking beforehand. I might just sort of talk a little bit about, one of the, I just wrote down a couple of things here. There's one of the sort of things that makes this difficult is like, you mentioned that there's sort of a bimodal distribution. What I saw in that slide deck that was the one with it looked very unimodal to me. It looked a long tails on either side and long stretch, which makes it very hard in the classroom, but really hard to decide where to divide the line, and it's part of the this problem, no matter if you're doing 104 or whatever, it hasn't necessarily solved the well, it's easy to split these two components. It's still like you have to remember if there is a better and worse, but maybe that's not where we're headed. So that's one question, sort of one thought. Another thought I have too is it seems like a lot of folks really like the current models of how things are working within the ELA. And whether there's the accelerated writing across the disciplines opportunity, people really like that. And people also seem to really like the ELA as it is. I guess I haven't heard as much complaints about like ELA grade 6 and ELA grade 7 aren't current, or like we're currently boarding there. I've heard a lot of like, we love the writing across the disciplines thing, that acceleration. I've heard a lot of, we love like ELA grade 6 is really meeting my needs. I guess I don't remember, I'm just forgetting a lot of like, those grade 6 and grade 7 things aren't meeting our needs. And so I guess I part of this is like, yes, the acceleration at grade 8 sounds like it's been good for a lot of folks. And why not, the question is why not do that for everyone? Well, I guess one of the possible reasons is as we creep lower and lower into younger and younger grades, it becomes less and less appropriate developmentally and more of a challenge. That's one of the things I think about. That if it works for 8th graders, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for everyone else. Another theme that's come up tonight for me is like, well, a couple of things. Well, one of them was this idea of like, this real question of like, if a school is recommending you don't take this, what that means to a child, like that's a real heavy, like, you're not good enough for this course. However, how it's come across, it feels like a judgment that I can't imagine doesn't have some sort of like implicit bias in how that decision was come to. And reading, writing, however, how you're making this like recommendation, there's like biases built into that. And that makes me really uncomfortable. Sort of recommending students go or not. I think you understand where I'm coming from, where they like how you judge what students are capable on through any application process or whatever you call it. So that's one sort of concern I have. Another concern I had tonight is, this idea of like, okay, this trade-off in like
wanting, it can encourage people to take risks in the grade, right? Like, I hate grades, like whatever, I can teach in place, used to teach in place with no grade, but let's go back to the grade model. Like, grades are important for getting into college, right? Like, we want a transcript that are A's so we can go on with our career and like, I'm grade focused, you know, and a lot of times in my life, and if there is this like, so now if this is called honors on the transcript and I'm in college application register and it's like, you got a B in honors, well then that's different than you got an A in the non-honors, like I can read that. And then here we are taking this language, which does all the things I would want, which is not elevate this course as better, is more hard, is more difficult. And you got a flex, is that the lower or the higher? I don't know reading this transcript and you only got a B in it. So like, it becomes this conflict between how we hold the current like motivations we want our students to have in terms of like, take this risk, and then the future, like, what does this mean in your transcript?
Well, I don't think middle school grades mean.
Yeah. Fine, but I guess maybe as we go on to high school, maybe you're right, maybe that's off the table. So
They mean
maybe
everything.
let's get rid of grades entirely. Okay, let's hear a conversation.
Okay, no strategic plan though.
All right, fine,
Conversation.
good.
So say.
All right, I'll lay it out for that. Okay, so I can trust that. Okay, so the things that, the other sort of points that I come into this with, like things that would like make this sort of like more palatable, like if we're to move forward with this model, thinking about like all the folks who email me and have these conversations with folks on email, which has been really helpful, and other people just in person. I mean, one of the things, you know, one of the stresses with this is like, worries is the stress we're putting on kids and like this like anxiety and the loads. And one of the parents spoke of like how her student, her child didn't want to enroll this because she didn't want that extra stress. She wanted to do sports, she wanted to do these other things. And like, I guess my initial thinking coming in tonight is that, well, we should not make the workloads higher in these courses. They should be the same workload. Like, it's just like either like a more complex problem or not a less complex problem based on like where you're at. Like, the average student in either one of these courses should be doing the same amount of homework. It's just like either it like fits your brain like a little bit better in this way or a little bit better this way. It's not like you go in this course, you're gonna be like working all hours of the night, you gotta get ready to buckle down. That sounds like an unhealthy sort of thing to be saying to students, as opposed to like, when you're gonna be reading Nietzsche here and Dr. Seuss, I don't know, that's explaining a little bit.
If you look at the spread of reading levels, that's actually not so far fast.
So it's just, it's not that you're gonna be more, but you're gonna be doing reading at a level that is just like a challenge that's appropriate for where you're at, and not like you're committing your life to more. So I think that would be a conversation to have, is to make sure that we're not actually creating a course that's more work or a higher level. So that would, I think, for me, would be a good thing. I think obviously there's a lot around improving communication around the decisions, like of how these are made. I think I heard a lot of like parents that didn't even know these options existed or how these decisions were made, or like students didn't know. And like, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that. If we do this and opening up like everybody to have the options to move in and out. I do, so, you know, there's a lot around the emotional concerns that I think are real. I think the hierarchy of middle school and all that is real, and something we should be addressing, the social emotional needs, which I understand the arguments that there is some good and some bad to this potentially. I think on the sort of just the raw achievement side of things, which is one of the arguments, one of the things we're really concerned about, I guess I think there's a potential to actually like look at, to the extent we think NOIA data is real, is useful, is I would like us to like actually take that data, if we do this, and like do some real analyses with it and actually track this. I think that I said this in the past, like I'd like to have this data and put it in R and do some things, like, I mean, obviously fuzz, so I can't see identifiers, but there's a real potential to actually like do look at the residuals of what you predict students to do if we didn't have this model versus if we did have this model, to see both like, are you accelerate, like are those accelerated students like outperforming the expected based on history, but more importantly, what's happening with the unaccelerated students, the argument being that they should be outperforming the residuals of prediction of a model based on the past. Like, we could actually test that, right? And we could track that, and I think we should if we move forward.
be fitting models and there's, see, I wrote down my models in order here while I was sitting. But I think there's a lot of data we could leverage here and actually speak to some of the concerns both ways and look as we move through this process, like what's actually happening with growth and achievement, and are growth both going up? Is one going down, one going up, or are they both going up? So I think we should really do more with that. I think, you know, the same, I would love to be able to track the social emotional impact of this. And I know we had that climate survey and that we did once, and if we could, as we are increasing our capacity to track these things with our new hire, it's gonna be as well tracking the stuff. If we could keep tabs on the data around how this is impacting things. I think obviously there's some in work around the smart versus dumb self-labeling in school that I don't know if we can solve that or what we can do, but I think that's something that's worth addressing. And I guess there's this other point that was made, which is that we say these aren't tracking, but like the de facto scheduling conflicts mean that like if you're in this accelerated class and you have to only fit in this accelerated class, you end up with these divergent groups of students that just by the nature of scheduling get bifurcated, and it's not tracking, but it's de facto tracking because that's the only way to make the schedules work. And like across the board, like schooling across the subject. So I think, you know, there's some work around the scheduling and the way we do that I think is important. I don't know, I guess. So I don't know where I'm at, but like I'm very concerned. I don't feel like I'm in a place where I feel comfortable making this decision. Where I do think there's tracking, and I think that I'm okay elevating these folks. If maybe we're even elevating these folks more, like that's maybe a fine. And I definitely see this as better than chapter 104 pulling out 5 students. If we're choosing between those things, if that's the real choice we're making here. If there's more of a choice between some students going to grade 8 and I don't know. I definitely see that it's better than like only 5 students getting 104 special study. I think I'm gonna stop for now. That's
All right, I'll get you, Marissa. I just want to point out, my battery's coming, it's a long meeting. We have 10 educators who have to be in class tomorrow. And, you know, we're not deciding the future of the world, let alone the future of the district. We're just voting for 2 classes, or what are they, 17-20% of the time for next year, which will almost certainly be adjusted and reconfigured. So I just want to put that on the table, and I'm going to encourage board members to keep comments really focused going forward, especially if the 3 of us have had a chance to talk. Marissa?
I promise to keep this really quick. Your comment about grades. Grades have a lot of internal feelings connected to them. When you do well, you feel like you're doing well. When you do poorly, there's a lot of emotional baggage that goes with that. And then my second thought is I feel as though we haven't discussed the fact that 5th grade teachers said that the idea of a essay being used to like tell the 5th grade students that the essay is being used for this purpose would stress them out. That doesn't sit well with me. Just the idea that even saying to kids, hey, there's a possibility this is gonna be used for like some like calibration stuff, and to be real specific with that doesn't feel great. Personally, if those teachers are saying, hey, that doesn't seem like a great plan to tell our students the whole truth.
It wasn't the essay that we were concerned of, it was, they were wondering if the form that they expressed interest would be too much. Okay. The one that, they asked, why are you interested in this challenge class?
Okay.
That's the piece.
Okay,
They felt that the kids didn't have enough sense of what they're opting into.
Yes.
The essay wasn't there.
Okay. Then that thing, I think if you can explain the whole thing from top to bottom and feel confident that your students can deal with it, they are ready for our class.
Thank you. So any board member who hasn't spoken want to speak, or any board member have some absolutely hinging pivotal thing that's going to change their mind that they need to hear before we go to a vote?
I'll just state for the record that I'm supportive of this. I mean, I appreciate everybody's comments on both sides of it, and it's an important question for sure. For me, it comes down to really two things. One, it's, in my opinion, the best opportunity presented to us to meet student needs. And two, there's also a strong element of choice here for both students and parents, and it provides the most options. And based on my evaluation, gives us the best chance of a successful outcome for the most students. So for that reason, I'm supportive, and I appreciate everybody's different thoughts on this and all the hard work going around it. But I think moving forward, this is of the options on the table, the best one that we're presenting. So.
No, for me, it just comes down to, we have an obligation to meet students where they're at and move them forward. I think we also have an obligation to challenge students who choose to be challenged, and that's the key for me, who choose to be challenged. And that, to me, exists whether they have an IEP or chapter 104.
Just 15 seconds. Yep, Brian, I don't disagree with you. I think my kids would love these classes. It is the language that I'm hung up on, and it is all over the place. It's in the email that went out. So I do have a real issue with that, but I don't disagree with the benefits.
Okay, we ready for a vote? So the proposal on the table is to adopt courses for next year, the grade 6 ELA flex and the grade 7 ELA flex. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries 3-1-1. Okay. Next up, we have summer capital project. Do we need a break? Or people took the breaks as they went?
No,
I'm good to go. I know we're gonna have a break in 10 minutes. I mean, I'm good to go.
We're good?
Yeah.
I provided you with, a listing of our capital improvement plans, kind of how Bill and I have mapped them out for this year. We talked about previously that a chunk of our 500,000 we've set aside for capital improvement will go to be the match in the COPS grant, for the school security upgrade. So in order to get the, 600,000 from the federal government, we have to match at a level of, I think it's 166,000. It's on your sheet. I don't have mine pulled up, unfortunately. And so that's a portion of the allocation for next year. In addition to that, though, we have plans to do really two big projects in each of the complexes. Again, setting aside middle school for the most part, except for if it absolutely has to be done, because we're in the process of our construction application for the middle school. So the two projects we've selected are up in the high school to redo we call it the refresh of a classroom, doing it in the English wing and the hallway adjacent to that. So it's, we look at floors. In that area, it was built in the era of the concept classroom that I don't know the last time those walls have been opened. I would venture to say it's probably in the 80s, the last time those walls were open. So to actually build walls, to work on the flooring, painting, all of those upgrades. So we sought multiple quotes, ended up getting one. It's a difficult market to try to get people to bid on projects, and we ended up getting a quote that we feel like is a really good quote, and it's by a vendor that's worked for us before, the vendor that did the ASA kitchen remodel. And they have quoted us 192,000 for that. We had budgeted 200,000 for that project, so it came in thankfully in an area that we could fund. And so we recommend Hardy Construction for that project. The other big project is the grade 1-2 wing at ASA bathrooms. Those are really the last bathrooms in the school that haven't been upgraded, and they're really in need of that. So we got a quote. Hardy also submitted a quote for that project for $42,021. And so we'd like to move forward with both of those projects this summer. In addition, you remember that you've allocated 50,000 to the soccer lights project. That project is going to the planning board, June 19th. We submitted the package and, you know, when Bill took it down, he, you know, there are a lot of hoops in this town to do projects. And so it was, you know, no small lift to just jump through all the hoops to update the site plan. The selected vendor that Friends of Orno found is, I think, our best shot for getting that project approved, because the quality of their lights really is probably the best chance for minimal glare, minimal light spill. And so I think I'm going to wait until next meeting to bring you that vendor forward. I just need to have a little more feedback from the town before we bring that full project to you. The way that project will work is that, you know, it's the school's project. The Friends of Orno will need to write us a check to fund the balance that they're committed to. And then, you know, we execute the project. The timeline for that is just a little unknown with the planning board, so we hope to be able to do that project this summer, but once we get a better idea from the town staff over the next couple of weeks or week or so, I feel like we'll have a better idea and can talk about that next meeting. And the third thing or the last thing on the list is the playground, and ASA PTO was really hopeful of being able to find partners for to be able to have a match of sorts to go with the playground project. That's fallen through. They don't feel like what they thought was an option is going to be an option right now. So that project is a little bit on hold, but we want to keep the money earmarked. And Bill's working on getting some quotes to see what we could do with that amount of money. Because the red playground really needs an upgrade. So we'll be bringing you back more information when we have a little more there. So really, at this point, we need approval to move forward with the two projects I mentioned that Hardy Construction bid on for the English wing refresh and the grade 1-2 bathrooms at ASA.
So I would make a motion to authorize superintendent to enter into a contract with Hardy for not to exceed 200,000 for the ELA wing at the high school, and not to exceed 45K, same contractor for the ASA 1-2 bathrooms. Is there a second?
My second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Passes 5-0. I'm looking forward to the other two updates too, because I know those are important. Subcommittee reports. Policy subcommittee is a week from Thursday. I know we have a wellness policy. We may or may not finish off on naming parts of properties as well. I know we had water filters since the policy went in place, so I assume the water filter part is working well. Anything from UTC?
We meet next Thursday.
Okay, Spruce. The pump, yeah, we got to get that off the agenda. Curriculum subcommittee would be 2 weeks from Thursday.
13.
13, yep. Wellness committee, anything there? No,
We don't.
done for the year.
Done for the year.
We're bringing that wellness policy next meeting,
Yeah,
or actually the 18th, because the policy meeting's after next week's meeting, so we'll have to bring the wellness policy to the June 18th.
to the June 18th, yep. TI leadership team did meet, I think since the last board meeting. A lot of updates, a lot of figuring out what teams need to be successful going forward. Anything you would add to that, Susan?
I don't think so.
I mean, I would just say that for me, that structure has worked well to keep the ball moving actively on activities, and you know, not all like Susan has to do it all, but people across the school coordinating and doing things. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we move into the strategic plan. I haven't talked to Meredith about this, but something in that direction seems to have been pretty successful. Strategic plan team, you guys mostly were all there, and we got the consensus. I think it was I forget the count, it was 17 and 1, anyway, it was N and 1, where N was a fairly larger than a dozen. You know, thumbs up and one thumb sideways, I can live with it on the strategic plan as move forward, so. I think most of the remaining work is, we will bring it to 2 board meetings for discussion. You know, it's a big enough thing, we wanted to have a presentation. And then 2 weeks for people to react and get back to the board. We will have it, just like a policy, we'll have it discussed over 2 meetings. Final vote will be the last meeting in June. And then over the summer, there's work to do on polishing it up, getting nice graphics behind it, getting the data presentation into it and a few things like that. Anything else to add there?
No.
Any other business? Any requests for future agenda items? The floor is open for public comment. The floor is yours, Doug.
Thanks. Deb White again, 11 Sylvan Road, Orno Middle School, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I know you've already voted on the issue that I came for tonight. I do appreciate the thoughtful consideration. And statements. There were many times that I had to bite my lip. And those of you who know me know that was really hard. Brian, you mentioned that going forward was a no-cost issue. And actually, that's false. Tracy DeShane has to spend time creating, I think it's 2 new classes, possibly 2 new classes. And has not been offered paid time to do that. ELA, 2 of the teachers have to have time. They had a day or half a day in class time, but it was more to talk about how they might dovetail rather than what the syllabus of that class would look like and how it would be different from the non-flex class. So that's costs that need to be accounted for. And then for 2 new ELA classes, classroom sets of books need to be purchased, because if they're not necessarily reading the same texts, because they're going to be pushed, that's a whole new series of books. And again, that hasn't been thought about. So there are monetary costs to this issue, as well as many of the issues that Marissa stated so clearly and so wonderfully. And is there any, and I know you can't necessarily answer me because we're in a formal setting, so maybe afterwards, but is there any reason we're not using R to look at our data, or is the new person going to be, who's our new data person? I know you can't answer this. Be using R, because that looks like, well, it's open source, so it's good. But it looks like it could be very valuable for us in the long run. So thank you again for this late night, and thank you for your thoughts and thinking about that. And maybe I'll see you June. I'm having knee surgery on June 24th, so I might not see you the 18th of June.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, our next board meeting is next week, Tuesday, June 4th. Here, 6 p.m. here in the library or on Zoom. Are there any requests for information or follow-up?
I guess I would add, this idea of getting the data to do some of this follow-up on this question. That has to be for.
Yeah, that's our plan. We provided some data in the presentation you saw, but not to the extent that you're talking about. We have a data analyst now that can help us with R and that kind of
I guess
analysis.
I'm asking for the. It's like the Maria, I mean, a little bit more innovation and stuff.
We haven't traditionally, even, you know, we didn't recruit the board members very well.
Yeah.
I do think we have data analysts, so that offers opportunities going forward, but, right, that data is with the data, and so there's.
I'm still asking.
Well, all right, let's have that conversation. Request noted, let's have the conversation. Okay, any other requests for information or follow-up? I would make motion to go into exec, we will not be having any vote except to adjourn. After the executive session, I would make motion to go into executive session under 1 MRSA 4056A, evaluation of employees, administrators. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor of the executive session? 5-0.
I am tired.
Everybody.